T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, guys, another week, another podcast. Pretty excited about this one. We changed it up a little bit last minute, added a couple people, got a full crew. William Filipek's going to be sitting in, but before we get to our guest, US Art, guys, Timmy's coming up in a couple weeks. Think about your donations. Think about what you're bidding on. Get your membership. We keep talking about it. Everyone should have a membership at this point. You see it in the lower corner, gold member. Next, Super Show. I guess we don't have to talk about that anymore. We're done with the Super Show. But so let's bring them all in. We got Ron St.Pierre, John Carlson. Hop in your cherry today, buddy. Pretty excited about it. And heck, man, Mike Schultz. See, we're going to be talking import-export. Thought we throw one more in the group. Full house. But
how's it going, guys?
Good evening, guys.
Hey.
Hey. So seeing John's the newbie, I'm going to ask you the newbie question. John, why are you in the hobby? What was that snake you found as a kid? What was that energy? Where'd it come from?
When I was a kid, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, insulin dependent at 18 months, and I couldn't do much shit but stay in the house. And buried myself in books in the outdoors later. Didn't run with too many people, and been doing this a long time, man. True passion. Started with box turtles and snakes I could catch back in Illinois, and then it began, you know.
Okay, respect. And so when you started doing more commercially, started working with getting animals in and everything we were kind of talking about what year was that?
Started out in 1989. Okay. I walked out of college and I started exclusively exotics and built it up into a wholesale business in the Midwest. And ran that out dry until about last December, and we relocated to Indiana, and now we're just gonna change things up, and it's a new beginning, you know.
Cool, I like that. And then of course, you know, you're here because you know you and Ron go back a little bit. About what time did you guys meet up together?
Well, that was actually, I think, at Wayne Hill's second show in Daytona, or it was in Orlando at the time, Twin Towers.
Yep.
My brother-in-law ran into Ron, and I was standing in line to get a Jim Beam and a beer, and Bruce come over with Ron and went up to check things out. Ron had some stuff up for sale in his hotel room, and the friendship and a brotherhood was born, man.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, you're talking about trading animals. Back then at that show, there was a lot of trading being done in the hotel rooms, not so much at a convention center.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I can remember, you know, being that we were in wholesale and I bought a lot of stuff from Mike and Ray at Strictly back in them days. After I left Ron's room, I had some Cuban anoles and bags. I had a stack of black and white Cal Kings and deli cups. I'm getting off the elevator. Mike's there and he goes, "Man, we're going to have to keep you on a leash this weekend, John." And that was pretty funny. But that was back then. And it's come a long way over the years, you know.
Yeah, because
happy to see it.
Daytona just had its 30th year or 31st year this past year.
I am not sure. Ron, what year was that?
91 was the first one, I think. So
we ran into each other probably in 92, I guess.
I think it was 92.
Okay,
it might have been 91. No, you know what? 90 may have been the first one.
Yeah, I've got a 30th year anniversary T-shirt. I got that like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it's 90. So what the fuck? That's 34, 35, going on 35 now.
Okay, tight.
There really wasn't the show circuit back then. It was Wayne's show and Don Hamper's show up here, and that's pretty much all I can remember. And then later, Lee Watson's reptile swap, up here. And then it all began, from what I remember anyhow.
Got to talk to the Furkles not that long ago. And, we were talking about how old the scene in Ohio is. And, kind of like Florida and Ohio are two of the bigger reptile scenes early in the hobby and kind of expanded out there, like you said, with the show circuit. But that's really cool, man. That's I figured you went back at least that far, but this is something I never asked you before. Well, tell us a little more about because we're kind of going back and forth, but John, like I said, Ron, don't worry, we're gonna make this about you too. But I'm gonna get a little more into John to get started, just because this is all fresh.
Oh man, this is all about John. I don't give a fuck.
No, man.
John. This is supposed to be Ron St.Pierre podcast. We didn't put John's name on the banner, so
you the man, Ron.
Already giving too much attention, but so. One thing that I found really fascinating is, we talked a little bit about how the early days of the hobby, things would slip through the cracks mutation-wise. And, we even discussed, early in the day, pied ball pythons were throwaway animals in bags because they were considered defective in the early days of imports.
Yep.
And then we kind of talked a little more about, some of the pieds that came in. But, tell me a little bit about the morph scene, and then you made a comment about what changed all that.
Well, in the beginning, when all the ball pythons in season were coming out of Togo, Ghana, was it Benin, Ron, or Bien? So anyhow, they were just coming in bags. A lot of times those bags in the crates, they'd count how many were in there. They'd leave them in the bags and they'd forward them up to Chicago. And being that we were by that time a large volume distributor throughout the Midwest to the pet shops, when you dump open a bag, once in a blue moon, something would be in there. And for some reason, I would pull them out of the bags. And then they found their way elsewhere. And a lot of that was coordinated through Ron. I'd tell him what we had, and it would go, whereas up down to him or whoever. And Ron was in a different situation, though, being in the heart of Miami with all the importers down there. He could go in there and see the stuff when it was coming in, right, Ron?
Yeah, I had a field day for I got about 10 years out of that.
That was a pretty wild time back then, man.
I would go through every fucking shipment, and I pulled stuff out almost every time.
Yeah,
that's where the blood boas came from. All that shit.
The night I met you, you had photos, Polaroids of the blood boas at that show. I remember that, man.
Yeah, and tons of different ball python morphs, but I always considered them to be fucking pet rocks, and these guys were paying me $2,000 a pop for anything that was weird. So I was like, well, fuck that. I'm paying $9 for these things and flipping them for $2,000 without even having to put a single meal in them. And
these days. So you guys, Ron and John. So my name's Mike. I work for Ian at Outback Reptiles for about
what's up,
18 years.
Cool, man. Good to meet you.
So I mean, I stopped working there maybe 5 years ago now, but even 2007 to 2019 or whatever it was, he got in all these bags, and you know how it works. They'll send 200 bags of normals, and then they'll send 8 or 10 bags of specials, and then sometimes obviously the specials, they're picking out albinos and any yellow bellies that they see, ghosts, hypos, all that shit. But some of the normal bags, I mean, you're not going to find the crazy shit in there. They do pick that out, but every once in a while you'll get something really cool, like weird granites and striped stuff. And
like the markers, the pattern was nothing earth shattering probably, but it was unique enough where it slid through the cracks, so they knew it. Yes.
Yeah, see, back then they didn't even send special bags. It was just big bags of shit, and I used to dump it all out. I'd be like, hey, I'd go to Strictly, and I'd call Mike ahead of time, like, what's coming in this week? And he'd tell me, and I'm like, hey, I'll come by and I'll help you unpack the shit for free. And so I would go there and help them open the fucking boxes, and then I would pull anything out that was cool and throw them, and I'd buy 100 ball pythons, and 5 or 6 of those would be something special. And I got a ton of crazy shit. It wasn't just even with them too. It was, I did every species possible. So I constantly was pulling out weird monitors, weird pythons, boas, different lizards, all kinds of shit.
Yeah, we found
an albino savannah that came in caked in clay.
Yep. covered in mud. Nobody knew what it was.
Yeah, Ian brought in the albino Savannah probably 7 or 8 years ago. I think Barchek got it. I don't remember, but something like that.
Yeah, I remember seeing that one.
Yeah.
Didn't that one end up at JMG, I think?
You know what?
Pro Exotics. I think Pro
Junior and Junior
Exotics
used
was
to
the
pick
one
some
with
stuff
it.
out of bags, and I think they might have found like maybe an aneurystic one time based on the eye color, but I don't think they ever actually worked with the albinos. I remember Pro Exotics had them. I remember seeing them in the videos. They were kind of like raising them up, and I think it was just the one animal. I don't know if that was the one that came from you guys because I know you had a relationship with them.
No. The one that I had, I sold. I don't remember who I sold it to, but I do remember it died in like the mid 90s or something. The guy was having problems with it. But back then, people didn't know how to properly prosecute albino lizard projects that were sun loving. So they'd throw them in these bare ass tanks and blast them with fucking UV, and they'd fuck them up. They wouldn't give them the ability to hide.
They died, man. They didn't thrive in captivity.
Yeah, most of that shit's dead, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, it used to be, like I said, every week I would find new shit, and this went on for years. And then when I finally left Miami in '99 and moved to West Palm, I just stopped giving a fuck about going down there and going through shit. And by that time, I had so much of my own crap that I was working on that I just didn't care. And then, I mean, it still happens occasionally, from what I understand. I mean, fucking John he got a couple bags of Colombian boas a couple years ago, and he got the Jumanji boa in it.
Yeah.
Out of it. Two of them.
Forget that thing, man.
No, and we're going to bring up some pictures of that. I don't know if we're able to do that really quick, pop it on the background.
Yeah,
we'll keep talking in the meantime. But, because I want to show off a little bit about what those look like. But before we do that, so, when we were talking earlier, like you guys were talking about pulling ball python mutations out.
Yeah.
We were talking to Craig Trumbauer a couple weeks ago, and he had mentioned like the first hypo that was on his table and how Kevin McCurley came over and was kind of bugging him for it. And I thought that Craig said he only paid like maybe $25 for it. And then he told McCurley $250. And then next time when McCurley actually reproduced them, he charged like $2,500. So, once they realized what the worth was as the demand went up. But so, as we get these images, tell us a little bit about like what that was like early on, pulling those animals out of the bag, what people were paying compared to a few years later when they became more popular. I know the price went up on everything that was weird.
I can recall getting a shipment in from Chris and Gene at LA Reptile, and there was a pastel ball python mixed in there. And that went to Ron, I believe. Later, that went to Greg, didn't it, Ron?
Yeah, I think so.
And then he finally got it to reproduce, proved out. And we were at the Orlando show, and I seen the price tag he had on them babies. And I was just like, Ron, if you're looking for me, I'm going to be in the bar, man. And that was that, And a ghost ball python back in the day. That one I shipped down to you too, Ron. What did you wind up doing with that one? Did that go to Kevin, I think, at Nerd?
No, I think I sold all those to Brian Sharp. I had like 5 of those hypos that I pulled out of shipments. Right. One that I got from him, and the other ones I think I paid $7 to $8 a piece for, or something like that. I had a flat fee of $2,000. So if I got something cool and you wanted it, it was $2,000, and that was what I did with it. And then I took that money and put it into shit that I wanted. Stupid shit, like tegus with it, or a dead end. For us in Florida, ended up being a dead end. But
that's how I put the roof on our first house, man, selling a ball.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was how I bought a house too. I mean, both John and I, we had no money and shit. We were self-employed and fucking not making shit. I mean, I used to sling animals out of the hotel room in Daytona for years, Orlando, because I couldn't afford tables. So I would just bring piles of shit up there, and then I'd run into these guys. I'm like, hey, I got a fucking bunch of cool shit upstairs. And that's how I met this fuck and his cut.
Then afterwards, there was a lot of fucking shenanigans with dumbass shit, man. Remember?
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of old bottle. I almost fucking did it.
Nah, don't go there.
Look, we didn't do the best job at this, but that was the animal that you had recently pulled out of a bag, and that would have been just like 2-3 years ago. And
Nothing like
one thing that I
that.
really love about that is, people think that doesn't happen anymore. And that was literally just by chance. That animal right there was mixed in with normals.
Yes,
Yeah.
that had not happened to me in years because people overseas, what I believe happened, finally got aware of what was going on here, and they would sort stuff before it left Africa or Colombia. Back in the day, it wasn't like that. And I got the 2 Jumanjis. It was December of 2020. It was a Saturday morning in the middle of, about a year into the pandemic. I ordered 200 baby boas through John Shanahan at Emerald Coral, who did the boa thing for years down there with this dude in Barranquilla. And I was pissed off. I had to go to the airport on Saturday morning, and I was unpacking them and saw the first one. I go, damn, and I put it in the drawer and finished unpacking all 200. There was a second one. And basically what John did when he got the crate from Colombia, they were in bags of 25, took 8 bags out of the crate, put them into styros, and sent them to Chicago Midway. And there they were. That it hasn't happened since, and it probably won't happen again, but it still can happen.
So it's funny, like we will get things. So nowadays we'll have that happen, but it's animals that nobody gives a shit about. So it's like we're not going to find the next new ball python morph for the normal bag. But like here, I'll show you a couple of things here that you'll see how funny it is. That like how useless it is. Let me upload this right here.
Still cool looking.
So like 2 or 3 years ago. Oh shit, I didn't save it yet. 2 or 3 years ago, we got an Axanthic Peter's banded skink.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's cool, but I don't know of anybody who's ever actually bred them. So how useful is that? But we sold it to somebody who actually has had some success with the species, I think. So
They're
we'll
pretty
see.
hard to keep alive, man.
Yeah, so here's the Peter's skink in a
I
second.
remember when they first came in, they were like $2,500. I saw them at the Hamburg show, and I think that price plummeted within like 6 months to a year.
Well, it's funny in Africa, they'll send in like a couple dozen of a new species, and then like you'll sell them for good money, and then like by the next year they'll send in like 7,000 of them. So.
Right, yeah, and then imagine being the guy that bought them the year beforehand. Damn.
Oh yeah, that is cool. Son of a
Yeah.
bitch.
We'll do better.
Yeah,
Technical
I mean,
difficulties. Stop lining up.
Dude, I crop it in the app, and it does not crop where you tell it to.
Yeah, but I figure Ron will enjoy this because I'm sure this
Yeah.
is the kind of stuff you're talking about back in the day you were finding.
Yeah, I found that kind of stuff is, and like you said, it still comes in because people don't care, and that's how I mean, albino knolls and shit like that. That kind of stuff is around. But I mean, honestly, even today, large scale breeders fuck up all the time and accidentally. I've done it.
Oh man,
Yeah, that's,
it was photoshopped.
I think we got like $500 for it at the most, but yeah, it literally came in a bag of normal Peter skinks. Like I remember I was over at Ian's place helping him sort shit out, and it was the last bag. I opened it and I was like, "Huh,
There it
Ian,
was.
did you have a special skink?" And he was like, "What?" So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that kind of shit happens.
When we talk like South America, like, when it comes to boas, like, the labyrinth boa was picked out of, it came out with the crystal boa, and Jeff Ronnie got the phone call for that, and he got those animals in. I even think back to like when Ben Brennick got the T-positive anaconda, somebody just Googled anacondas that found it. Ben's name came up enough on the internet that they just figured they'd give him a call and set something up, and that's how he got that animal.
Yeah.
But other than that, like nowadays, it's just, it always confuses me how you get in the inn. Does that make sense? Like, I want to know how to get that phone call.
there's another real hot ticket item there. Axanthic Dasypeltis.
Oh man.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that thing did end up dying. I don't know if it ever ate or anything. We kept it for a while trying to get it feeding before we sold it, but I just think that one didn't thrive. But another.
I will say that the majority of odd stuff that I did find over the years was Axanthic stuff. That seems to miss a lot of people really miss that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they look at it and think, "Oh, this is an ugly one of these," and they fucking throw it in
Perfect
there.
example is a type 1 Anery Colombian boa, man. They would come in with some regularity.
Yeah, they were pretty common back then. Yeah, for sure.
What?
But it still happens.
No. So you guys have pulled stuff out of the bags before. A lot of times, like I like the instant satisfaction of like selling something. I know Ron back in the day in bows, we talked about the blood boa. We talked about the type 2 anearthristic, the motley boa, all animals that went through you out of an import bag. Was there ever anything that you sold that you wish you would have held on to?
All the fucking ball pythons.
Yeah, all of them, man. Shit, we had the first banana ball over here.
I even had solid black ball pythons, and I fucking just sold them.
No
and
shit.
now you don't even see them in the trade at all. Like I pulled somewhere in the neighborhood of, how many you think, John? Probably 20 black ones.
Yeah.
Some of them had a little bit of yellow on them, but I
You
had
would
2 or
come
3 of them
across
that were
more
almost
than
entirely
I-
black. Huh?
You would come across more than I would because you were in the element where everything was coming in, And
Yeah, that
I mean, I had one of the first genetic stripe ball pythons, and I sold it to a guy named Greg Chip. I paid.
goddamn, I haven't heard that name in a long time.
I paid $200 for it from Chris, and I did a crazy trade for some quince monitors that were really rare back then. I flipped quince monitors for $3,500, and if I am correct, I may be wrong. I believe that animal may have wound up with Bob Clark. The ivory ball python that came in 1998 was an adult female. That I sold, made a considerable amount of money, and that actually turned out to be a desert ghost.
Oh, did you mention that was an animal that came in, or was that an animal you said was at a California pet store, maybe? Or how did you tell me that story?
No, the desert ghost, with Chris and Gene back in the day at LA Reptile, it seems like, and Ron will tell you, he really liked the two of us.
Yep.
And they would put oddball stuff on their list, and it would generate orders. And Gene would always make the joke, all I got to do is put a fucking weird thing on my list, and I'm going to get an order out of exclusively.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I'd get a phone call from him, hey, I got this. I think you'd like it. Nah.
Yep.
The desert ghost was on her list. They called it an ivory ball python. I got it. I was going to hang on to it. I had photos of it. I took him to, I think it was Daytona. Showed him around. Nobody bid on it. And Greg Chip got that one. And I think it worked its way down to Mark and Kim. But I may be wrong on that,
Okay. Well, inevitably, they clearly got down to Mark and Kim because they have done pretty much most of DG breeding over the last 3 decades at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron, if we would have kept half the shit we sold, we wouldn't have much to worry about right now, would we?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. We would have pissed it all away, I think.
Probably.
That's how it goes.
Yeah. I had Potter on years ago, and he talked about how he invested in a lot of albino boa constrictors and things like that with Pete Call. And he talked about all the horror stories of like bad breedings that he had and so forth. And the way he put it, if he just fucking bought ball pythons, he would have been the next Ralph Davis, but he put all his money into boas when he got out of, I believe, the Army.
Yeah, I remember when he was doing that.
Yeah. But,
I don't know, man. I really don't have any regrets over any of this stuff. I don't know. For me, it's always, I don't really give a shit about the money. I mean, I need enough money to keep food on the table and the
That's
roof
what it
over
was
my
all
head.
about, man.
But I never really gave a shit about. That's why I never did any of that stuff. It wasn't stuff I had an interest in, and the stuff I do have an interest in generally doesn't make a lot of money. I mean, the Tegus were a little bit of an outlier. They were good for a while. That's why I've always done bearded dragons on the side, on the down low. They power all the stupid shit that I go out and risk money on, like fucking emerald tree boas. Lose your ass. And
so I know William had a few questions about emeralds while we talk about this. You want to jump into that, and then we'll jump into some import stuff in a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Will. We'll sit back and listen to you for a second.
Here we go. Well, it's nice to see both of you. I've been never got to meet either of you, so it's a pleasure to get to talk to you guys.
Yeah, you too, man.
My friend.
So I was curious about the whole emerald thing. So how is that going, or how did that end up? And do you have a green python collection still? And just more about your snake stuff, I guess, is what I followed you probably the most with.
So the emerald thing is still going. The notochondro is still okay. That we're actually in the process of doing something entirely different.
Okay.
It did really good for 6 months, and then as the weather got cooler, I started having issues. I tried to rectify it, and I couldn't seem to get it back going, and things kept going. Anyway, it was a semi crater. I've been able to stop it and start to reverse it. And I basically what I think now is that my fucking water system got too cold, which I wouldn't have thought would have been a thing, but that may have been what caused all this in the beginning. And so we're doing this entirely new, massive walk-in outdoor enclosure for part of the year that's got full overhead and heated water system and everything. And then during the winter months, as soon as it cools off, I'm just going to say fuck it and bring them all in and run them inside in a temperature controlled thing, because I can't seem to be able to manage them outdoors here. Do you guys still hear me? Did I fucking die here?
I can hear you.
Oh, you're picking up a little bit.
And what about the diet? What about the diet? Too?
So
that was something else I was interested in, because I know that stirred the pot in the emerald community.
So honestly, we're still not sure. If I feed them just fucking commercial rodents with commercial rodent diet in their gut, they fucking puke them. But if you take them off and you don't, and you feed them like soft fur rodents, soft fur rats that have never touched a rodent block, they hold them down. So I feel like there's some I think there's two things, at least in my situation, we've identified two potential causes. One that I'm fairly certain of is the water temperature. They need to be, you basically can't the water needs to be about 80 some degrees. It seems like, if you're going to rain on them the way we rain on them. And then the other thing is potentially I still think that the rodent block, or there's something with the rats, man. I don't know exactly what it is. I can't say for sure. All I'm saying is that they seem to have a hard time with it. And when I've talked to other people that do similar large colubrids and boas from that region, it seems like everything from that Suriname, Guyana area is touchy. Like they puke a lot. There's a lot of regurgitation problems with a bunch of species that have one thing in common, and they're from that particular area of the world. So the question is, because we know that they feed on the spiny rat, which is a fruit-eating rat, are the rats that we're feeding them, are we fucking them up? Not necessarily right away. I've seen some dumbass fucking comments like, they're not becoming gluten-free. No.
Anything unnatural is going to be stored in the digestive tract of that snake, and in time it could develop into renal failure.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's possible that, again, there's a lot of fucking chemicals in commercial diets, and it's possible that these animals from this particular region are just susceptible to it. That over time, you damage it, and then at some point, you push them over. And there are no long-term, reliable, successful breeders of northern emeralds that are at least out there, right? I mean, how often do you see captive bred emeralds? You see one here, one there. People have a clutch here, a clutch there. But where a snake that is that valuable, it's that actually has a good solid market. The market has never ever been really filled, so it's wide open. Doesn't make any fucking sense that they've been importing them for 40, 50 years in fairly large quantities. They're not all sick. That's fucking ridiculous that they're all, that's one of the things. Oh, well, they have a disease. Every fucking one of them. And why aren't they dead all over the fucking countryside if that's true? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
In a situation like that, though, when they collect the animals and they hold them before they're sent to the States, they could go through hell as well.
And that's one of the things people have said in the past. But you've got multiple sources spread out over decades, and it's always the same thing, right? The problem has never gone away. And one of the things I've heard a lot from people is, yep, I got them. Mine were doing good for 6 months, 8 months, a year. 2 years, and then all of a sudden the whole fucking thing fell out from under them. And that's
that. Yep.
right. So it's like a thing, and that is a huge red flag that says husbandry is off. There's something that we're missing. There's something that's not right. I mean, man, by this time, I've done hundreds, well over 100 species. A lot of them, nobody gave a shit about, just to see if I could do them. I never made anything. I didn't even make it public. It was one of the things that, hey, that's kind of cool, and I'm going to fuck with this for a while. And I've never run into something that I couldn't overcome just by looking at where it comes from and then trying to find, reasonable, things that I could do here that would kind of work. You could always find a way. And, this particular animal, though, there lots of people have tried it. Everybody has problems. So I'm still trying. I'm still trying. I may lose everything that I invested in because, to be honest, I took a project I worked 13 years on, which was the Anole project. I cashed it all out, and I had a partner in that. And we took 100% of that money, which I really couldn't have even afforded to do. And I threw it into this emerald thing because I thought, okay, maybe what I built from the anoles, I could port it over and then, make it work. And so far, it's been a fucking hole I've dumped money into.
Going back to whether it's a disease thing. So I had a Rico Walder emerald. He actually recently died, but he was probably 20 years old at this point. But for whatever reason, he was fine for 20 years or whatever, how old he was, just eating rats. And I only fed him like probably once a month or so. He's an adult male at that point. He doesn't eat much food. But I had an imported animal, really nice female, really clean, was eating great, doing everything. I dewormed her, multiple treatments, had her checked, had Dr. Stahl check her fecals and everything. And he was like, yeah, she's clean. Like, she's good to go. I put her in with them. She was in with them for a solid year. Because this was so I had her for about a year and a half. Did all the fecals and stuff. I put her in with him. He was in with her for the full, cooling down season, everything, warmed her back up, and she dropped dead. I was like, okay. And then he lived this was probably 6 years after, later after that too. So like, if there was something that she had, he probably would have contracted it,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you would have thought so, man.
Yeah. Like I said, dude, it doesn't make sense, right? There's a lot of things about that animal that just don't make fucking sense. And then as I made that public about the food thing, a lot of other professional breeders, well, some of them I didn't even know until they reached out to me and they told me their stories, privately and there was very similar things. It was snakes from this particular region, bigger snakes that probably feed on this fucking rat. That rat is the most common thing there. So again, the rat seems like it's a sort of the smoking gun, but then there's also there's the water thing. So I'm really, it could be a combination of both. They might require so much fucking water. Like they will drink for hours if you rain on them hard. And they usually don't even start for 15 minutes. Like I'll fire up the system, which I have this huge overhead, sprinkler system. And I can run it as long as I fucking want. As a matter of fact, I used it to trigger some frogs a few months ago. Like I bought them at Daytona. I brought them home. They were adults. I threw them out in this thing, turned it on, ran it for fucking 2 days or whatever, and got 1,800 white street frogs out of it. So it was like an instant. It was pretty quick turnaround.
That's what's cool about what you do, though, Ryan. You always find a use for something you've built for a previous project, and you make use of it, man, and it worked out,
Well, I was doing that to bail my ass out of the fucking hole I dug with the Emerald project. So it was like, oh shit, I better generate some money fast, and this was a way to quickly do it. But yeah, so when I start raining on them, when I fire that thing up, it takes 15 minutes, almost to the second before they start moving around drinking. And then when they do that, they'll do it for 2 hours. You'll see them just with their head on the side of the cage. They kind of position. They either sit and drink out of their coil, or they will move to an area of the side of the cage where the water is running down pretty hard, and then they'll catch it there, and then they'll just sit there for fucking an hour, 2 hours, just drinking. So And, you know, when it's warm, I can do that every single day. And every day they spend that amount of time drinking. So that, to me, that seems like, you know, and by the way, these things have a basin of water, like half of their enclosure is fucking standing water that's constantly flushed out. So if they want standing water at any time, they can go down there and fill themselves up. Yet, even with that, when I rain on them, they do that. So, you know, and the rain, I mean, I've looked at rain totals for that region. It's pretty fucking high. So that's the question I have. Not to mention, there's also the fact that the humidity is extreme. I mean, I've never been there, but it can't be that much different than fucking Florida. You know, when you go in the lower areas, the air humidity is unreal. So they're most likely, you know, they get a lot of their hydration that way as well by breathing it in and processing it, probably similar to chameleons. We're finding that a lot of arboreal reptiles do that. So they get a lot of their hydration just from water vapor. So, but I don't know, man. It's still a fucking, I'm about to, you know, Scott and I are doing this. I have this huge walk-in thing I was using for storage on the side of the building. It's all wire and shit. Matter of fact, originally I had big monitors in it. So we were like, well, fuck this. Let's gut this thing and turn it into a giant walk-in emerald enclosure and for the warm months and see if that works. You know, try to get some different things. And we're buying a water heater, an inline water heater that'll water I'll be able to actually heat all the water that runs through the overhead. So that I think those things, and then just keeping them on a diet of, you know, basically organic fucking rodents.
Right.
I just don't know how else to put it.
Yeah. Well, I think it's common and not common, but it seems to happen in a few species like white lips, ring pythons, and they tend to cough up hairballs. So why is that? Is the hair bothering their stomach? Do they not eat a whole lot of rodents, or is the hair of a European rodent just different than ones found in New Guinea? Or you know, another one is something that doesn't get talked about a whole lot is Angolan pythons. I've noticed Angolan pythons tend to have issues with either too many frequent meals or too big of meals too often, and they tend to either not all the way digest it or cough up a hairball, or they just eating more birds and they don't have eat as much mammals. So, you know, birds having hollow bones, it's probably easier to digest that than something like a rodent or a mammal in general that generally will have thicker bone density than a bird would. So I think there's so many factors to it. So yeah, I totally see why, you know, why you'd have that train of thought with the fruit and all that.
Yeah, I mean, just like you pointed out, see, a lot of that shit I didn't even think about. So we don't know. We really don't have a lot of answers.
Right.
We know a few species that we have templates for, and then we try to take those templates and then just assume you can apply them to everything, and it doesn't fucking work. So anything that's not currently already established regularly, you can pretty much assume that it's because that we just don't have the template for them, that we're off in some way, you know. Maybe birds are a thing for some of them, maybe. The only reason, hang on a minute, I got a rogue bulldog I gotta move. Get your butt out here. Come on.
But going back to the rodent thing, I mean, if you look at the crap they put in the food we eat that's sold, you're talking about a diet for a rodent. I mean, what do they really put in that we're not aware of that could be long-term exposure to it through digestion of a reptile? If they're storing all that, what could happen, you know? I mean, adult onset diabetes is caused by poor diet, and, you know, kids with attention deficit disorder, all that kind of stuff, man.
And you know, when you guys are talking about this, you know, we didn't really crack the code of everything. We figured out a lot of things over the years, but there's still a lot of species that there's still a lot of what ifs that we're still working on, like talking about the emeralds. But two questions, and I'll let you kind of go on about it. So neonates, when they come in, farm raised, let's call farm seed. Have you guys noticed that babies are easier to adjust acclimating in captivity? Also, are there any breeders that successfully breed emeralds outside that you're aware of?
No, but as far as I know, but I mean that that's a tricky question to answer though, because there's a lot of people that aren't on the radar at all. And then every once in a while somebody will come up to me at a show and say, "Hey, I've been doing this and doing it this way for X amount of years," but they just don't make it known. They like all of us, we're all out in the public to some degree, but there's a lot of fucking people out there that do this shit that are not in the public at all.
Yeah,
and it's kind of
a lot of guys like that. Yeah.
So we have so it's hard to say for sure. I don't know anybody that's doing them outdoors, but also, I mean, there's only a few places in the country where you could even attempt this outdoors. And I just happen to be in one of them. So I have that luxury and I always try to take advantage of that shit. But again, it's not really that. I mean, it's proven to be extraordinarily difficult. Like I got to tell you, I definitely fucked up in my assessment of how simple this would be, because when I brought them initially in and they were doing so good for 6 months, man, they were fucking rocking. Like it was perfect. No regurg, just everybody's fucking eating, everybody's drinking. Very simple. And it looked good. And then as soon as fucking August ended, and then initially I went first to the fucking rodent problem, because we've kind of thought that how do I put this? So in the past, I've seen problems with bearded dragons that if you fed them like, egg-laying chicken mash, commercial grade shit, if you fed the crickets that, and then you fed them to the dragons, then it would give the dragons basically the worst case of the shits. And it would paint the walls, right? It was totally not normal. And then I never really paid much attention to it. But then when Heather and I got together in 2016, she noticed it and she was like, "Oh, this is fucked up, that there's something wrong." And so she made changes to the diet that we were feeding the insects, and it all went away. Then they were perfect again. So ever since then, we kind of look at food a little differently, especially when it comes to like commercial raised stuff. And, like I said, there's a lot of fucking chemicals in that shit. You don't know what I don't know what a lot of that stuff is. And it's hard to know, those preservatives, the chemicals, some of that stuff. Maybe there's too much of certain vitamins in some of that shit. Not everything's the same. So it's just kind of one size fits all. However, the caveat to that is I could be totally fucking wrong. The food may have nothing to do with the problem with the emeralds at all. It may be a factor that I haven't thought of, that nobody else has thought of yet. We just don't know. So for now, I'm still on the thing of, okay, is it water temperature? Is that an issue? Or is it food? So those are just two avenues that I'm going down, but it doesn't mean that they're the right ones. And maybe somebody else will figure it out too. So, and that's why I go on these things and put this shit out there, because I want other people to be successful and to figure this out, because, I don't give a fuck if there's 50 people doing this, as long as we get them established, because I want to go to shows. If I want fucking captive bred emeralds, I want to be able to get them. And you just,
Right.
You can almost not get them. I would be happier if they were, a couple $100, but they were everywhere, than if there's almost none around, and they're a couple thousand. I mean, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I just want to see this thing continue to go forward and not, we kind of been sitting idle for a long time. So we got to a point relatively quickly, and then we kind of stagnated as far as advancement, right? We still don't have, we're starting, other people are starting to definitely make advancements in things like Bolins. So you're starting to see more of those, you're starting to see it again. But for a long time there, we kind of sat there, everybody was just, I'm as guilty of this as anybody. I was just fucking cranking out, bearded dragons and tegus for the pet trade. And then, and everybody else was doing ball pythons and stuff like that. Again, totally, it's not anything negative. It's just, that's what we were all doing. So
Yeah, I think
And
you two.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, it's all you, buddy. Go for it.
I would say I think you two can speak probably more about this than anything, being importers from way back when, is how many species you were able to get readily back in like the 80s and 90s, and now you can't get anymore because it's illegal, they're endangered or whatever it is. So it's like, if you take this stuff for granted, who knows in the next 5, 10, 20 years if it'll still be there. And, if we don't build a founding group of whatever, as long as you like it, I think that's the thing too. You got to actually like it. I don't think people should force themselves to like something or animals that just clearly aren't good for captivity either. But, like a bunch of different species that would be good for captivity, but people just don't bother putting the time in because they see no, quote, financial gain from it or anything.
Yeah,
not now
for sure.
until they're taken away, and then when there's only like a small group, and then what is it, the Chinese water dragons? I remember those.
Yeah,
they were coming up in numbers up till about 2 years ago, a year ago, and that's it.
Yeah. Now they're like $400.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And,
they're more than
look at all the stuff that used to come in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we were doing Australian water dragons up until last year, and they would sell probably for half. I mean, the green water dragon is way fucking cooler. It it was a $4, $5 imported lizard, so, and you could find them in every Petco, so nobody gave a shit. Now they're gone. I mean, it's actually a fucking pretty cool animal. I used to breed those in the 90s. Yeah, I bred them in the 90s for a few years, and I was always able to get good money for captive bred ones because at the time you couldn't even get, like, they weren't importing babies. Like, they're farming them now, and or were at that point, and there would be thousands of babies coming in. But in the 90s, it was all big, busted up face ones. So if you were actually producing them, I could take them to Daytona and get $75 a piece, and that, for me, that was good money, and I was happy with that. They lay 4 or 5 clutches a year. They're basically kind of like bearded dragons, but I had big green, just in groups outside. And it was, I did green basilis too. That was another one.
What's funny, Ed Marino does all the basins. He started breeding like green basilis in like the 80s or something. And he moved on from green basilis to Amazon basins. I think that's all he's ever bred, maybe some northerns, but a weird path,
Yeah, and that's the other interesting thing is that basins appear to be a much more stable. And they don't seem to have the problems that the northerns have. Northerns have fucking real problems as far as so there's but the basins found further south, which the temperatures are a little less stable there. Like the northerns are like right fucking there where the temperatures are relatively stable. So the further south you go, obviously, the more you start getting into temperate. It's not actually temperate, but it's more like south. Yeah, it's more like South Florida, or Caribbean temperate, where they get some cold nights. And
kind of like looking at a Colombian black and white tegu, a gold tegu, as opposed to an Argentine.
Yeah. And gold tegus are a fucking pain in the ass to breed in captivity.
I got a litter, two clutches one year out of a pair.
I remember that.
The Argentine thing, and they would lay 8 eggs, whereas the Argentine black and white tegu, farther away from the equator, their clutches would run about 50.
I had 2 50+ clutches for my red tegus last year.
Yeah, I love tegus, man.
Yeah, and I worked on some of those more northern variants for a while, and I was like, fuck these things. Why would I waste my time with this little gold tegu that nobody wants anyway because they're mean as shit? When I could just have a yard full of red and blue and black and white tegus that crank out and everybody likes them and they're tame. And
here's something about going back to the blues. I think the blues are from a warmer region, because like I brewmate all my tegus in my basement. It gets down to like 50 degrees or so. And dude, I keep losing blue tegus. Like my reds, my black and whites, they're all fine. I don't think I've ever lost an adult black and white or a red.
So 45 degrees is the kill point for a blue tegu.
So what probably happened was it just dropped right down there, and that's why I lost a couple blues last year.
I had the same experience with blues back in the 90s. In hibernation, when I cooled them, man, I lost a couple of them. And I was successful with the Argentine black and whites back then,
So the blue tegus, I got those from a fish importer in Miami. And they had told me initially that they came in with Colombian tegus. And for years, that's what I was told. But about 10 years after I got them, they told me that they were actually found on the grounds of their fish exporter in, I think, northern Brazil. So they are more, they're closer to the equator. They're north of where the reds and the black and whites are and all that. So that's probably why they can't take, like I said, I found that if the temperature gets below 45 and their bellies are exposed to that, so then they'll die. If they're underground, and their bellies are on the ground, they can survive down in the 30s. But there's some whatever. I assume that it's because their organs are less protected by the ventral scales or something. Because if I had them in raised enclosures where the wind could blow underneath them, if it got below 45, it would fucking kill them. But when I put them directly on the ground and let them, just kind of burrow under boards and shit, they could take ice all over everything and they were fine.
Yeah, there's one year I came back from. So I put them outside kind of late March. We're here in Missouri where moderate temperatures, but still gets too cold in the winter. I put them outside like kind of late March and then bring them in like first week or two of October. I got back from a Tinley one year, the October Tinley, and it dropped to like 38 degrees, and I was like, oh fuck, all my tegus are gonna be dead. But they're all fine. All the reds, they were rock solid, but I brought them inside. They were good.
Yeah, the reds could take. I mean, that's why the black and whites are surviving really well in Florida too, because nothing's going to fucking kill them here. Now, I don't know if they can actually survive for long periods once they get north of the Florida border, start getting into Georgia and Alabama and shit. That gets a lot colder. Down here, we don't have that kind of shit. And if you can burrow into the ground here, even just underneath shit.
If you look at Burt Langerworth, though, man, in Alabama, out them black and whites, man.
Yeah, I know, but I went there.
He told me over the years that, he was about as far north of the equator as Argentina was south. So he figured he'd be all right doing
he was, but he was doing special stuff too there. I mean, I went and saw
he had like almost greenhouse-like enclosures when I was down glass and
the tegus, I mean, he did keep the red tegus like that, but the black and whites were in open air, walled enclosures. But that motherfucker took like an entire living room's worth of carpet and turned it into a giant, massive fucking pile in the middle of the enclosure. So when they go down, I mean, that's all insulated, I mean, when they go down into that fucking, they could go into the carpet and underneath it. So they were in the ground. I mean, holy shit. It was actually, I really like that idea, but it looks like total shit. And that's why, and Heather won't let us do that. But it's actually it was a great idea because you need, like, I have to use 6 mil plastic on everything to try to fight off the cold wind. But if I put that kind of carpet in all these enclosures, we wouldn't even need the fucking plastic. I wouldn't care what the hell happened out there. Everything would be fine. It'd be underneath. And I mean, he was a fucking genius. He did stuff
absolutely
out there that was, and he was also like us though. He did everything on the cheap. Everything was what, he wasn't
a workaholic, man.
Well, yeah, he was that for sure. But he found creative, cheap ways to pull off, to engineer difficult problems. And he was definitely, I don't think we have anybody like that since. He was on another level with shit like that. And yep, it looked like shit. And a lot of it was like I said, you had carpet fibers everywhere because you have these big lizards that tear up the carpet. But if you think about it, when we go fucking snake hunting, we look, at least in Florida, we look for carpets.
Yeah. I was about to say, we need to rate some of our snake hunting spots.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I used to cut carpets on every fucking rock pile in areas that I was hunting snakes when I was a kid. We'd go out and drive the cane fields, and every culvert had all these rocks on it. And we'd put carpets on there and come back a couple weeks later and flip them over. And there were times you get 4 or 5 big fucking kings under a single carpet. A lot of them were gravid.
Same thing up in Illinois. We'd put out sets, you know.
Yeah.
And, spring of the year, go back the following year, man. It was pretty cool. Back
Yep.
then, you could legally, commercially collect, and that's
Yeah,
kind of
that's
how
when-
I worked. That's kind of how I worked my way into the whole thing too, selling snakes to
Yeah.
pet farm. Because I
Yeah,
had
and
a
that's
job
when
at
everybody
Pet
was
Shop.
building. That's when everybody was building their colonies because there wasn't a lot of captive bred colubrids at all. So people were going out to Texas and getting gray bands. They were coming to Florida to get corns, and I used to catch Miami phase corns in a abandoned crack house in my neighborhood because I grew up in the hood, and we had abandoned crack houses in my neighborhood. And one day, one of my friends jumped over. I don't remember he may have been smoking crack for all I know in the house. I don't know. But he's like, dude, I found this fucking snake, and he brings it to my house, and it's a beautiful silver and red corn snake. And it was little. And so I was like, it was weird. It was like 3 or 4 houses away. So we went over there, we jumped the fence and started ripping the walls were all torn up. So you would pull shit like off the walls and fucking little corn snakes. And this was right in the city. But yeah, and then people, I would sell them, and then I guess people like the Loves, and they would go to the place and they would buy them and breed them, and people were doing that kind of stuff. So,
I was talking to William about this beforehand, but you were talking about back in the day when you were younger about going in the yellow pages to find herping spots.
Yep.
Yeah, that was all based on facilities that were breaking down. You were going and finding invasives pretty much all around them in Florida.
Well, when I was like 16 years old, no, actually I was younger than that because I didn't even have a car. So I was probably like 12 or 13 years old. My dad, he used to cut trees on the weekend for people, and we cut trees for this guy, and I caught a Cubanole in the yard, and the guy saw me with the Cubanole, and he's like, "Oh, you like reptiles?" And I was like, "Yeah," and I thought he was going to make me let it go, and instead he's like, "Hey, well, I got a warehouse down the road," and he talked to my dad. He's like, "Why don't you bring your kid over and let him pick out something?" So we go over there, and it's a place called Sika Animals, which was a guy named Jack Waller. This was like, so I would have been like 12. So we're talking about 1980. And we went to this place, and I'll never forget it because one whole wall were these floor to ceiling kind of walk-in wire enclosures, and the whole thing started hissing, and it was full of Honduran boa constrictors, the dark ones. And it was because he specifically imported from Honduras. That was his gig. So he let me pick out a big ass amoeba, some kind of Honduran amoeba. I don't remember what it was. And he just gave it to me. And I hung out there with, my dad, and we walked around. But when we left, as we were driving out of the fucking parking lot, there were green iguanas running up the wall, and there was shit all over the parking lot. There were amoebas running around. So I was like, fuck this. I'm coming back on my bike and a couple of friends. And so we went back, and that weekend behind the place, it was an open field and a lake. We caught like 25 Honduran wood turtles. We caught dude, I had bags of shit. And then I'm fucking thinking, I'm like, okay, there's got to be more of these places. So fortunately for me, my grandmother, for whatever fucking reason, collected phone books, Miami phone books. So she had all the phone books going back to when they first started. I think it was like the 1950s, 40s or 50s. And so one day I sat in her closet, and I started pulling out these phone books, opening them up, looking for animal dealers, and I wrote down all the fucking the locations, and then I would catch sometimes 3 and 4 metro buses and a metro rail, and we would end up at these places. They were almost always in warehouse districts, and about 90% of them produced colonies of things that nobody was really catching. Rainbow lizards and
those rainbow lizards were smoking hot that you used to catch, man.
Yeah.
The color on that thing.
There were days that I caught 500 of those in a single day just by laying a garbage can down along a wall. It was all these big warehouses. So they had long walls and the train tracks that ran through them. And the rainbow lizards were all up and down the train tracks. I mean, there were so many, but they're hard to catch because they were fast. So I thought, well, if we get a square mouth garbage can and you lay it on the ground, and then like one of us, I would go with like 2 or 3 friends, and one of us would walk about, a block down and then just start walking back, and you would fucking herd the lizards along this wall, and then they would flood into the bucket. Sometimes you lift the bucket up and there'd be 20 or 30 of them in there.
Well, so the wall lizards, the Italian wall lizard.
Yeah, the ones that are in.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the other biggest spots in the country is Joplin, Missouri, which is about 2 hours from me.
Oh,
And I
no
knew it
shit.
was, but I was kind of thinking, yeah, one of these days I'll go check it out, see if I can find the colony. And so like I was in town for a photography gig like last year. And I was like, fuck, I'll go a day early. I'll stay in a hotel. I'll go see if I can find these things. Dude, and like it's funny, you're saying like a crack dance. All of downtown Joplin, Missouri is like crackhead central. Like they're all
Right.
walking the streets. And so here I am in this, ghetto ass neighborhood, a bunch of crackheads everywhere. And like, dude, the lizards are everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, like every house had like a big stone wall along it. And they're all cracked up. But, the lizards are so fast, I could barely catch it. I caught a handful of them. But, these crackheads are looking at me like, the fuck is this guy doing in my yard? But I was thinking, dude, like, I should just hand out business cards. Be like, dude, every one of these things you catch, I'll give you $1. Because they sell for like $15-$20. But so I came up with this idea. And then I was like, let me double check the legality of this. And I looked on the Missouri Conservation Department website. And it was like 2 weeks previously, they made it illegal to possess them in the state of Missouri because they were invasive. And I was like, so,
That's funny you say that though, because I made my first iteration of what I do was a little business called Introduced Herpetofauna, and I had these stupid little cards, and I had all the different invasive species that I would catch on them, and I would give those cards out in those neighborhoods. I'm like, hey, here's my number. If you see something, call me up and I'll come and get it. And I got so much shit out of that, like that. Boas. I remember there was a big boa on a fence. I got tons of different lizards. I give them out to all the police departments. I'm like, hey, if you get a call, I'll come out and do it for free. Just, and I had all these people calling me. And then, and I also use them for dick moves. Like there was this one of the best Florida King hunting spots back in the early 90s, late 80s, was a specific road. And there was a whole bunch of other commercial collectors. And a lot of them were kind of, let's say they were standoffish if you ran into them while you were hitting sets. Now, one of them pissed us off, and I was like, "Fuck these motherfuckers!" So I would hit their sets and put my business card at every fucking one of them. Because they would like make threats and shit. And I was like, "What the fuck you gonna do, man? Fucking little bitch."
Amen to that, brother.
They were. Some of them guys were something else. I mean, I had one guy in my own fucking neighborhood when I was catching Cuban anoles. I used to do it in my car. So I had a collapsible noose pole that would collapse down about 18 inches, but would extend to 8 feet. So I figured out I don't even need to get out of the car for this. I can just pull them underneath the tree, put the thing out, noose them, pull them into the car, and put them in a bag. So I'm doing my own neighborhood. This motherfucker in this little pickup truck, his name was Doug French. He was this fucking drug-addled fucking asshole.
So Florida collector.
And he swings, he blocks me in, and he jumps out of his truck, beat-faced red, saying he's going to kick my ass, screaming at me. I was like, look, bitch, I got a 9mm in here if you want to fucking do this. And at the time, I was I was a very angry person back then. I have calmed down in my old age, but I was a fucking asshole. And honestly, that was about as close. I really thought I was going to shoot this prick in the fucking road. And he got back in his fucking car and he takes off and he's like, stay the fuck out of my neighborhood. I'm like, bitch, I live right there. So you can get the fuck out of here. And that's what started. And then I started fucking with those guys intentionally. Like I would hit their sets if I knew where they were, and then I would leave my fucking card. I was like, what are you going to do? Because they were all fucking talking. But Miami was pretty stupid about shit like that back in the day. And there were about 8, how many do you think? 8 to 10 commercial collectors out of South Florida at the time, John?
Well, there was Manny, there was you.
Manny was a good one.
Ron, A lot of beers since then, man. I love that shit, bro. You know? Basically, boiled down, I was getting everything from you, and I lost touch with all them guys. You ought to tell them the story about that zoo we went to in Key Biscayne, man.
Oh, yeah. I spent a lot of time in there. It was
That
an abandoned.
awesome, dude.
Huh?
Is that the one that's abandoned now?
Yeah, it was abandoned even back then.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah, on Key Biscayne, right? Dude, you know how they have those old monkey cages in there? When we were kids, we used to lie to each other's parents, and we would fucking take the bus out there onto that island. We would sleep in those monkey cages and spend like 2 days running around in this old zoo catching all kinds of shit. We caught brown caiman in that, matas, fucking rhino iguanas.
Remember that big fucking water monitor that was
water monitors? Yep. That place was amazing. It was an abandoned zoo, and when they left, they became Metro Zoo. And so they pulled all the animals off. It was on this island. They pulled everything that they could, and they just left shit there. There was like stuff living there, running around. There was all these different lizard species. I found crested anoles there and put those in the trade back then. There's a giant blue amoeba that was there that I used to get every once in a while. There was tons of iguanas, spiny tails. A lot of different turtles, though. There was a bunch of lakes, and there were
them turtles. I went in the water trying to get. I don't even remember it. And you're like, Carlson, you're a fucking dumbass, man. There's alligators down here. You're just like looking at it like, what a dumbass, you know?
Yeah. There was crocodiles in there at the time.
I don't remember what type of turtle that was, though, to this day.
I don't remember. Your stupid ass was in the mud, though. He was so fucking. I'm like, dude, if you knew what was potentially in there, you would not be doing this.
Well, we used to
in Chicago all the time.
Man, Indiana, man, you go out and you take your hands and you go up under the bank in the weeds, and turtles would be sleeping up there at night, and you'd get them.
Illinois.
Well, yeah, but
that doesn't work down here, man.
When I got to Florida, I kind of kept my Yankee perspective on things, and that's how I was looking at it, you know. And
my wife at the time, she looked at me. She's like, "What? Why are you letting him do this?" I'm like, "He's on his own. And he loses an arm, I'll take him to the hospital."
Yeah. So, and talking about it really in the hobby too, like, you talked about that, you were using those resources of all these invasives to then resell into the hobby. And that was, again, a good source of income for you for a long time.
Yeah, I did it till I was about 30 years old. So we're talking like 90, 99, I guess. When I moved to Loxahatchee, I quit completely. I mean, Hurricane Andrew in 92 pretty much ended that, but I was still able to do it a little more afterwards, but it destroyed everything, all the places that we used to catch stuff. Because I mostly focused on non-native species. I would only do things like corn snakes and king snakes during the off season when I could not find anole, the invasive anoles. And at the time, like I said, people were building their colubrid colonies, so Brooks kings were in demand. Florida kings were in demand, good corn snakes. And there was so much of that, and it was all in disturbed areas. Like you didn't go into like pristine Everglades to get this stuff. This stuff was all in like cities or suburb areas. They were in trash piles along train tracks, in crack houses. So they were, Remember
that time we were on that fucking dirt road, man, and we were flipping rugs and carpet, and there was a dead goat under a piece of carpet missing its freaking head. You remember that, Ron?
Yeah.
You said it was some kind of Santeria shit or something?
Yeah, it was Santeria.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I found 2 fucking bodies, too, doing this shit, unfortunately.
Shit. Yeah.
I
found a lot of dildos. I've never found a dead body yet. I don't know what it is about the spot I'm going to, but it's either an empty box.
Could have shipped them up to Chad Fuchs, bro.
Well, I take pictures and send it to Chad, but I'm not that good.
I found a dead horse on Card Sound Road south of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I found a dead horse there once.
Dude, I love Card Sound Road. That's one of the fucking most. Did you go looking for tegus out there?
Oh, I found them all over the place down there.
Yeah, it's crazy. But once you get to where that prison is, they're fucking everywhere.
Oh yeah, I went out there with a buddy. We had a little noose pole because we were just hey, we got a week off. Let's go down to Florida and fuck around. So we got one of those extendable like crappie poles from like Walmart and put a noose.
That's what I use, but I would cut it down to 18 inches. Yeah. It takes 3 of those poles to make an 18-inch one because you got to get the exact right size. Yeah. But we used to buy them and then chop them until we got the perfect, and then it would go to 18. Then you don't even have to get a fucking car, man, because fucking walking. But that's funny. That Card Sound Road spot, one of the best fucking Brooks King spots I ever had was out there. It was always produced.
Yeah, we'd go all those like kind of crossroads, and just everyone we turned down, you'd see 3 or 4 of them just running back and forth. Yeah.
Yep. And all those trash piles that are out there full of fucking corn snakes, full of king snakes. Those are good.
Nice, really nice Everglades rats, like right up in that little.
Yep.
That's actually funny. Speaking of that, a guy at the 2 reptile shows ago, this guy, I think it was a Tennessee show, and he was like, "Dude, I've got a really good spot down in Florida for some OKT corn snakes." And I was like, "Really, buddy? I can tell you a really good spot in Jasper County, South Carolina, if you want to."
I've run there with Ray Senior, man.
He's done that, yeah.
Beautiful out there, man.
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun doing that over the years with Pops, man.
Yep, I went down there fairly recently, but it's all hunt club, and they'll chase you off now. So.
Yep. OKT Gun Club, man.
Yep. Yeah, you were kind of talking about like the dead goats and stuff. I think I talked to Carlos with Tropical Reptiles.
Yeah,
I got that right. But I think he talked about he went out and he got into like a clearing and there was like a cauldron in the middle. I think they looked like there might have been some blood and there was like a bunch of like sticks in it and the grass around it was all laid down. And he had told a couple stories about being out there, just some of the weird stuff you see.
That's funny that you bring that up because one of the most terrifying things that ever happened to us at night. My daughter was like 3 years old at the time, so this had to be 93. And during the off season, like I said, when the anoles and stuff weren't readily available, I would do corn snakes and king snakes. Well, there was a dirt road west of Miami that went way the fuck out into the Everglades, and it was your one car would barely fit down this thing. It was heavy foliage on both sides. There was never, ever anybody out there. I'd hunted it, 20 or 30 times. One night we were on the way back from near Card Sound Road, actually. And we didn't get anything that night. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just cruise that little dirt road and see if there's anything in the road. So we're driving, we're probably about a mile down and I see lights at the end of the thing, but they're not headlights. There's just a strange light. And as we get closer, we realize that it's a whole bunch of fucking people dressed in some weird shit around a burning metal fucking vat, a metal, one of those big, like,
cattle trough.
No, it's not a cattle, a chemical barrel. So they were burning this. Yeah, they had a fire going in this chemical barrel. So as I'm getting a little closer to them, all of a sudden they start pointing at us. Motherfuckers start running at us like lost. And my wife at the time fucking screamed. She's like, "We got to get the fuck out of here because that's very aggressive." They were not friendly, whatever the fuck they were doing. So I was driving this little Ford Ranger at the time. I put it in fucking reverse and I reversed down this fucking road. Honestly, it's a miracle I made it as fast as I could still hear the gears grinding as I'm fucking essentially flooring it in reverse. And these fucking crazy ass motherfuckers are running right at us. I don't know what the fuck we walked into. Whatever that was, it was not good. And I never went back. I was like, nope, no more. And that was the catalyst though I went out and bought a 9mm the next day and I never fucking left the house. When I went hunting, I always had it in the car after that because I was like, I don't know what the fuck that was. And that was, plus because I had my daughter and she was like 3 years old at the time. So I was like, yeah, that's not cool. And we're not doing this again. So I actually quit night hunting after that. That was the end of that. I was like, fuck this. I'll just find something else. And I started flipping, going through more shipments after that. All these things are somewhat connected. Bad shit happened, forced me to do something else. The Andrew pushed me into breeding more full time and less reliance on commercial collecting. And
My only scary moments were really just like, because I was blatantly trespassing, people come out, the hell y'all doing out here? It's like, snake, sir. And it's like, I ain't sure I believe that,
Then you pull it out of
we'd hunt Kankakee, man, for the black bulls back in the day. Hopkins Park, man, it's probably the most depressed community in the state of Illinois. It's in a sand prairie, relic sand prairie, man. And we're going into this abandoned house. We're flipping the tent outside, catching eastern hogs, bull snakes. Go in this house, see what's in there. And there's this old dude sitting in there in a rocking chair. You wouldn't think anybody even lived there, man. And we lit out of there like you wouldn't believe. Scared the shit out of us, man. And then they'd come up to you, what are y'all doing out here? And, you kind of put yourself in. I'm surprised nobody ever approached us with a damn gun,
Yeah.
And but those were the chances you took back then, when you wanted to go hunting some stuff, man.
Yeah, I have a spot in Missouri for pygmies, and it's pretty much you walk these railroad tracks left to right. And if you walk far enough to the right, it kind of comes to an opening where you kind of see a house far in the distance. There's like a cattle crossing there. So we kind of got to there, we turned back and we're walking, and we hear like yelling behind us, but we're talking, a few hundred yards, maybe further. And we kind of look back, and it's this guy, and he's waving a gun around. He's like, "Get the fuck out of here! Get the fuck out of here!" So we kind of put our hand up, and we just continue walking. And I take my snake hook and I flip over a little piece of tin as I'm going. And you hear a gunshot and fucking leaves fall down from over our head. So the air, like, fuck me, but I got his address. Not aggressive. Maybe like a glitter bomb package or, maybe of that. But that one freaked me out a little bit because I was one of the person. I think it was actually with a girl herping, and fuck me, man. But that's probably the closest or weirdest thing I've ever had happen is someone actually taking a shot in our direction to scare us.
That one guy. Remember we were walking those train tracks in Oklahoma. Where the fuck were we?
Oh,
Stillwater. Yeah, we were in Stillwater, Oklahoma. Walking some train tracks, looking for shit to flip. And this dude was walking along the tracks for like miles. We could see him coming towards us. And then he went into the bushes.
Yeah.
And we were like walking past it, like the whole way. Like, where the fuck did this guy? Like, we never saw him again. I don't know what the hell he was doing.
Yeah. I think it was just before that too. Mike flipped over like a coffee can. There's a full skunk underneath it, man. I was
There was like a metal. It was like one of those. What the fuck was it? It was like a piece of metal that it was like twice the size of like a coffee can. And I'm like, let's flip it. I opened it, and the entire skunk was under there. Yeah, so we booked it.
Yeah, build it all.
Yeah, I will say that most of the people that I ever ran into were it was positive. Most people were cool. Even the cops that would, when you're out at night, the cops will come around. And once I showed them what I was doing, 99% of them were cool as fuck. I think only one of them was a fucking problem, and he just basically bounced us out of where we were. But most of them were like, "Oh, that's cool," and then they tell you a story about where they saw something, and then they send you. I got a lot of good leads out of that stuff too. Like, I could drive through my neighborhood and people would fucking flag me down to come get Cuban anoles out of their yard because they were eating their mangoes. So I got lots of stuff like that. They knew me as, the crazy guy that would drive around in his truck and catch lizards. So
there was a spot in Northern Virginia, like Haymarket, right out where Ian lives. And there's like a couple mountains over there in that general area. And people like, I would go snake hunting, just cruising up the roads up there. I'd find copperheads and stuff here and there, maybe some eastern milks. And then one time someone I was flipping rocks and somebody was like a local, I guess they asked me what I was doing. I told them. And they're like, "Oh, you ever seen those red ones?" And I'm like, "We're in Northern Virginia. Like, there shouldn't be any red ones here." And apparently there's like this tiny little area like on one mountain out there that has these, basically a coastal plains milk snake, like some kind of relic population that found its way there. And I found one dead on the road, like years and years. Like I never even found. I flip rocks like a motherfucker. But I've got another buddy who goes out there. He's found a few of them since, and he, I don't know if you guys know David Dean. He finds a lot of milk snakes, so he's found a couple of them out there. And another familiar who you might know, Greg North. He showed me some that he had caught in like the 80s in that same mountain. And I was like, holy shit, it's like a weird little population of coastal plains milk snakes, like Piedmont, Virginia. So actually, I'll see if I can. It's
like the Louisiana milk snake is pretty much non-existent in the trade now.
Yeah.
And those
You know, when you hear-
those used to Danny Edler, man, he was a hunter, green anoles, green tree frogs, and there was an island that somehow separated from the mainland after a hurricane, and all these Louisiana milks were on this island, and then they put up no trespassing signs, and that was the end of it, man. And he had come across bodies floating in the river too down there, man. Old Cajun dude, he was a good man. But
when you hear stories like that, though, you got to wonder if there's not other other mountaintops that there's milk snakes that are not even discovered yet, because they're really fucking hard to find. If you think about how difficult it is just to find one.
Right.
So, I mean, it's not like, you know, I often wonder, like in South Florida, there's the 10,000 islands, you know, there's all these little islands out there. How do you know there's not, you know, unknown gecko species, unknown colubrids potentially, or subspecies of corn snakes that have separated and are out there? Because it's just all this, you know, you have this vast area and nobody really, you know, unless the right person at the right time happens to stumble across something, new shit could exist there that nobody even knows is there. They find new species all the time.
No, and you know, that's actually one cool thing about like iNaturalists. You know, you have people who don't understand what they're looking at, posting pictures, and you know, that's gonna be something that I'm gonna put time into, just really scanning through things. And I bet you find things that aren't supposed to be where they're being found.
Yep, I agree.
That's one way of doing it. But I'm trying to think. By the way, William, I love looking at you, but at some point, you gotta let me know what you want to talk about.
Yeah, sorry, man.
I could talk about herping too, but all mine crazy ones are from like Indonesia and shit like that.
that's pretty.
So that's
cool.
gonna be
Uh,
better than anything.
That
else.
would be interesting, man.
Yeah, well,
it's
kind of cool
you
milk
guys.
snake once, you know.
Mine is like a language barrier, and on top of that, if you're white, they already think you're suspicious as it is, you know, because then they're, especially if you're going in their national parks and stuff like that, they're like, yeah, we don't trust you out here, you know. That's what got us in trouble.
Yeah, never trust whitey, buddy.
Right.
But so you know, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, and you know, if MJ is listening, he's going to hate this, but I want to talk about ball pythons a little more. Just because, you know, I enjoyed those early days, you know, some of that mutation stuff, and you know, just careers were made on single ball python mutations.
Yep.
You know, the one we were talking about, you know, where Noah's name came up, and you know, some people in the game know who Noah is, but the banana ball python. John, you were talking about that a little earlier. You want to tell me about that again?
Yeah, well, what I had noticed is stuff was coming in randomly in shipments, and then we were at Wayne's show. That was probably fourth or fifth one, and I noticed Noah sitting there with Philippe de Beaujolais' ball python manual, and I think he had come over here. It's my theory, and seen what was going on, the craze for this oddball stuff, and then they started probably sorting stuff in Africa. So that kind of, it diminished what was coming in drastically. I mean, it almost went to like nothing was coming in unless you were specifically ordering it from overseas, from the farm, paying more money for it. And that's kind of how that began, I believe, you know. It's my theory anyhow. And
It became a little more wise. And I think I mentioned before, and I really hope this isn't a fabrication of story, but you know, there's a gentleman I talked to that went to college with him, I believe, at Florida State. I believe the gentleman's name was Mike. I got to go through my old contacts, talked to him like 4 years ago. But he had talked about that, you know, him and Noah kind of worked up the idea of him going over there, finding these animals and bringing them back over, at least posting about them, or not posting, but emailing people what he's getting. And that kind of started that whole thing. And this might be a bad way of comparing it, but like, you know, back in the day when I told people that weren't hobbyists about, you know, characters in Africa, maybe finding ball pythons. Now, I think that Blood Diamond movie came out, and I'm like, yeah, I'm sure it's a lot like Blood Diamond. You know, there's a guy who's kind of running the show. He's sending a bunch of people out there. They're finding these animals, bringing them back, and he's profiting from it. You know, they're getting their bit, but, you know, he was definitely doing far better than everybody else. But did you get your hands on the early banana ball python?
yeah, it was the first one. Well, I take that back. Kevin had, from Nerd, had a coral glow. And then a second one was in Africa. However, when I was told about it, They thought it was a caramel albino.
Ian did the exact same thing, and he's been like, fuck me for the last like 20 years.
Yeah.
So what happened, man? I arranged the sale with Will Slough through Mike at Strictly, and we agreed to bring it in for him, and I brokered it to him. And when it came in, it was not a caramel albino. It was totally different, obviously. And at first, Mike was like, hey, man, it's not a caramel. We could probably get more money for this. Let's try to shop it around. And then we came to the agreement because, you know, Will, in good faith, prepaid for the snake and signed off on it. And I kind of was like, Mike, we got to do this, man. And there it came. And so I picked the thing up at Delta, and I get it to the house. This is probably in 1999 or 2000, and I'm looking at this thing, and I look at my wife, and I go, we really ought to keep this one. And she goes, it's from Africa. It could die.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to do stuff around this house. I mean, it's what we did for a living. So I drove it over to Will, and that was it. History was made, and it was gone, and I made some money, and everybody made a little dough. And I believe the first year he proved out the banana, babies there weren't many that he offered. They were always female. And he sold them for $45K a piece. His initial investment was $25K in the original animal. And as time went on, next several years, he would always only hatch females. And then he made a male. And it seemed like when he raised up that male and put it back to other snakes, he was making more males than females. And they coined that male maker, you know? I don't know if you guys remember that. But
Yeah.
that was pretty interesting. And yeah, I mean, I think the guy that really deserves credit on doing what he did with the banana, not only is Will, but Brock Wagner took that all the way to the next level, you know? And I remember Will was going through a rough patch, man, and I went and got his collection out of the house, and I was going to oversee the breeding of it. And Brock had caught wind that I had it, and we'd talked, and he was concerned with what he had going on and what us doing over there might happen. And then Will decided to sell the whole thing, and Will's entire collection went over to John from Albinos Unlimited. He flew to Chicago, rented a truck, and snowing like hell that day. And he came over to the house, and we bagged everything up, man.
Yeah, it's funny. John at Albinos Unlimited, he actually got those jester balls that came in. Do you remember those things? Like they look kind of like a banana, but
I do remember that.
Never did anything.
Yeah, that was his thing there for a while. He was all excited about it, man.
Well, that's the thing you were saying. Like it's from Africa. Like people are like, Ian, why would you sell the sun? Because he sold the Sunset to Brian when he brought that in. They're like, why would you sell that? And he's like, it could not prove. It could die. You know.
Yeah.
So, or it could be a jester ball, you know.
Well, that's like the first albino Suriname boas. I think there was 2 or 3 of them that came in. Different individuals had them, and nothing ever came of it, you know. Until years later, didn't Barrera bring some in, Ron?
What?
The albino Suriname boa, man. Barrera brought some in years later, right?
Yeah, Mike did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was in the last 5 years.
Yeah, he got some like 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, I actually helped broker that deal too on an albino Suriname back in the day, and that thing went for $40K back then. And nothing came off that investment, you know?
Yeah.
No, there's a lot of risk involved.
Absolutely. Phone just moved, guys.
People only know about the ones that succeeded. They don't know about all the ones that failed before you had
There's
it.
probably plenty of them out there that we know nothing about.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Oh, I've seen a ton of them. I sell them to people as dinkers, and you never hear about them again.
Yeah.
Voodoo.
Yep.
Sure. No, you know, and I tell this story a lot, and people in the hobby know about it. But you know, around the time of the Sunset, there was the Viper ball python that Ralph Davis was working on. He was partners with Barczak, and they got a lot of clutches in, started breeding them back to each other, and they never reproduced that animal. And if you saw the original, you would have thought it was genetic. But what overlapped in that time is they had the sunset ball python, or at least Brian had the sunset. And with them not being successful with the viper, when he bred the sunset to normals, he bred it to 3 females and only made normals. He assumed it had to be Kodam and gave up on the project. Yep. Held 2 females back, put the other 20 animals into the pet trade. And then later on, his employee Josh Roberts talked Brian into breeding the original sunset male at one of those girls instead of just putting a champagne on it. And lo and behold, they produced that. And then I think within about a year of that is when Brian made the scaleless ball python. So at one point he had 2 of what was the hottest projects in the hobby. Now, Sunset's still around. I don't think we'll ever see another. We'll see some scaleless ball pythons. It's just probably better off we don't.
Right.
Yeah.
So to that point, we found over the years that there's quite a few mutations that, let's just say you find an adult that is clearly unique, right? And you breed it, and then you don't get the results you're expecting. And you're just like, what the fuck? This is probably not genetic. But we found with a few different lizard species that it's just a matter of holding those animals, and that's ontogenic change that is, there are bearded dragons that are born normal that can turn purple. There are there's just a variety of different animals like that out there that when you breed them, they look, the tokay geckos and all that shit. You breed them and you think you got fucked and you got nothing. But if you held them long enough, and the other thing that we found is that a lot of that ontogenic shit is variable, right? So some of them can change in a few weeks. Some of them can take up to a couple of years within the same mutation. Like she's had dragons that appeared normal for 2 or 3 years that were from these, animals that we know produce them. And then all of a sudden one morning, the damn thing sheds out. It's a full blown adult. And now it's fucking purple and orange and looks like a totally different thing. So there's a lot of those. I think that's a form of progressive piebaldism in these animals. And it just manifests itself in ways that maybe we're not, we're expecting a white pieds, but I don't think it works that way on that.
You're expecting a visual right out of the gate.
Yeah, and you're expecting a visual.
Well, I also wonder with the tokays, because I don't know a whole lot about them. I haven't messed with it a whole lot, but that guy Mike in Virginia, he was actually he actually worked with credit card companies, and he would sell you your merchant services.
Right.
And, he was like, Michael's tokay horde. He had all those different morphs, like the super reds and the piebalds and the calicos. But I always wondered, you would breed all these things together, and I'm like, are you sure you don't just have 3 different calico type genes you're trying to breed together? And
that's possible too.
The reason they're not proving out because it's 3 different genes that you're breeding. You never know. You got triple heads or something. So
yeah, I had a white Leachianus sold to me in a parking lot in Charlotte, North Carolina. Guy came to me. But he hit me up and he's like, "Hey Dave, I got something cool. It just came into my hands. Sent me a picture. He's like, you interested?" I was like, "Yeah, I'd like that." So I went and met up with him. He had an adult female and this adult male that was just a yellowish white. You've seen the white Leachianus floating around the hobby. So we bred it one time out and nothing happened. I believe some of those babies are still in Buffalo, New York, and inevitably the animal ended up going to Leap and Leachies. And as far as I'm aware, I know he had some females over there. I have to follow up with him at this Tinley to see if he had any success with that project, maybe bring them together. But just because they look the same, they might not have been compatible lines of mutation. But side by side, you would have thought they were the same. But the male that I ended up putting in his hands, as far as I'm aware, was the only male to date ever found. But there were multiple females that had that look to them that had popped up in collections or, clearly popped up in collections, not out of the wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we always assume that unless it's from the same source that it's probably not compatible just automatically. And we'll process the projects as though, because we have gotten in, things sometimes where 2 different sources have what appears to be the same thing. So in the past, I have done breedings like that and they didn't work. And then I was like, okay. And then you find out, you made fucking double heads.
Yeah.
And then now you have, when you breed those together, now you're producing 2 fucking morphs that look the same but are not compatible. So that's you see that.
So you don't know what the hell you're looking at, man.
Yeah, you see this all the time with albino red ears, right? The
Same
albino
thing
red
happened to me with the albino common snapping turtles, man.
Yeah.
Back in the day when I was working with them.
Yeah, it just happened to me with the albino anoles. I had 2 different albino anoles from 2 different counties that looked exactly alike, and when I bred them together, I got double fucking heads. So I was like, oh, look at that. Yeah, good luck trying to figure them out.
Well, the opposite of that, the toffee and the candy, they came from the same village in Africa. The same guy caught them a year apart. One went to Pete, one went to Canada or whatever. So
and those are compatible?
Yep, same gene.
Yeah. But
he's got a board that produces them.
Brian Sharp, early investor in the albino project with Pete Call, then he got a male imported, bred him to the Pete Call line animals and never made it. Who would have thought that was going to happen? So, like, to this day, I'm sure there's some sharp albinos out there, heck call, and people just don't even realize it.
Yeah, for sure. Brian Sharp is the one who got the bulk of my ball python collection. My daughter started going to elementary school, and like I said, I lived in a pretty bad neighborhood, and on her
I remember that argument very well. That you had with Stella, man.
She had an issue in school, like in the first month, and this was in like kindergarten. So I was like, "Fuck this! We're leaving." So I cashed out the Motley boa. I had been pretty much self-employed my entire life doing the reptile thing. I had little odd jobs back, when I was a kid, but nothing. So I had no credit, none of that shit. So I had to come up with half the money for a house up front to get non-income verification loan. So we bought a $99,000 house in Palm Beach. I came up with $50,000. Plus I needed another 20 or 30 to move all my shit. Because I had all that outdoor enclosure. So I cashed out my ball pythons and my Motley boa project, which I think I ended up bouncing out with about $80,000 from that. Brian Sharp bought the ball pythons. Jeremy Stone bought the Motley boa project.
Remember how long that Motley sat on Strictly's list, bro? They called it the Bizarre Boa.
Bizarre Boa.
What was the story? You went in there and you were dropping off bearded dragons. You looked at the Bizarre Boa. Then you went over looking at the corn snakes, and you're like, man, that looks like Motley corn, right? Is that how it went?
No, actually, your fucking dumbass asked me to pick up Motley corn snakes from Strictly.
Well, I don't remember.
To throw in your shipment. So I was up there, and Chris Hansen was in charge of that room. And Chris had the fucking Motley corn snakes in a box underneath the Bizarre Boa. So I'm over there picking out your snakes, and I'm holding it in my hand, and I'm looking up at the Bizarre Boas right there, eye level. And I'm like, this has the same fucking side pattern as that fucking boa. And then I pulled the boa down and I looked at it from top down, and I'm like, oh my God, this is the same fucking thing. This is a Motley boa, the Motley mutation in the boa. So I bought his shit, and then I took the box to Mike in the office, and I'm like, hey man, how much do you want for this fucking thing? Because he had it on the list for like
$1,500.
No, it was more than that.
I thought it was $1,500, Ron.
I thought it was 25. I don't remember. He gave it to it was 25 on the list, and I got it for 15.
It said at 25, I didn't even pay that. And he lowered it to 15. Nobody was popping on it, man.
And I didn't even pay that. I gave him. I was like, look, you've had this thing for 2 years, and I'll give you 300 night animals for it. And he was like, okay. Because at the time he was selling a fuck ton of night animals. So I was one of the largest collectors of those. I would go out every day and catch 100 of them and drop them off at all the different importers, which is what got me in the door really initially, to be able to go through all the shipments. Because if they fucking picked the phone and called me up and said, hey, I need 50 Cuban anoles by tomorrow, as long as the weather cooperated, I'd have them at the door. So I was one of the only commercial collectors that wasn't constantly drugged out and in a corner somewhere.
Right.
So I was able to totally dominate that scene down there while I was doing it, because I was always super hardcore fucking, I have regrets during that time period because I don't even really remember my daughter growing up, because I was always fucking working. That's why I try not to work at all these days, because I'm trying to enjoy shit.
What was cool about back in them days, man, you never knew what was going to happen next, man.
Yeah.
I mean, remember them big fucking snails from Africa? Then the fucking Fed showed up at my place because they were afraid
that wound up on Good Morning America.
Damage to the fucking citrus crops in Florida.
That was on Good Morning America. Fucking friend of ours.
I remember that shit.
Fucking friend of ours, Brian Blackwood, the one who brought in the Motley Boas. He calls me up one day. He's like, dude, you got to come down here and check out these giant fucking snails I got in from Africa. So I go over there, and he's got them in a bin on the side of his house, and they're crawling out of the bin, and they're crawling up the wall of his house, and the paint is disappearing from where.
Dude, I put an orange in. 10-gallon tank with 4 of them damn things.
They were that
morning,
fucking big.
Gone.
And they were totally illegal.
I got to plug my phone in, guys. It's dying.
They were totally illegal, and somehow Fish and Wildlife signed off on them. I guess they didn't know what the fuck they were. Blackwood brings them in and ships them to this jackass and shipped them all over the U.S. And then all of a sudden,
a shitload of them, man.
The USDA found him in a pet store somewhere, and the next thing you know, he got raided. And he was on Good Morning America.
Man, I get to knock down the door. It's USDA.
Yeah.
So what the shit, you know?
Blackwood got raided. They're like, these things eat paint off of houses. They'll destroy crops. You can't have them. We spent millions to eradicate them from Florida once before in the 50s. And he was like, he didn't fucking know. Brian wasn't the smartest fucking guy. And but it was kind of funny because I get up one morning, I flip on fucking TV, and they're on Good Morning America. It's fucking Brian Blackwood. They're interviewing him about bringing in all these destructive snails into the thing, and then this motherfucker calls me up. He's like, the USDA came and took them up.
Fuck, man.
If Fish and Wildlife cleared them, you'd think, oh, they must be all right, right?
Well,
Yeah.
you were indirectly involved with news broadcasts on a couple of occasions, man. What about the time you had that big dead berm, man, and you coiled it up between the 2 cars at that restaurant? Why don't you tell them that story, bro?
Yeah, I was 16. Like I said, I was a fucking asshole.
It was
a good thing I
kick ass back then.
It was a good thing I went to jail when I was 18 because that fucking straightened my ass out. But I bought it was an African rock python. I bought it from this fucking guy in Arizona. And in the middle of fucking summer, he sticks a 13-foot African rock python in a single, basically a 12 by 12, a 15 by 15 styrofoam box. When I got to the airport and saw the box, I was like, there's no fucking way. He lied. This thing has to be like 5 feet. And I opened it up and he stuffed it in this fucking box and he didn't put any air holes and it was dead. I was super fucking pissed because at the time I was working on breeding those. Anyway, I'm on my way home and this fucking guy in this fucking Lincoln Continental cut me off. And I think he was drunk. He almost fucking hit me. And then he pulled into this Denny's parking lot and he got out of his car and went in the Denny's. And I was like, fuck this motherfucker. I got this dead fucking. So I pulled up next to the thing. I took the snake and I curled it up right outside of his fucking door. Like I said, it was stupid. I shouldn't have done it. And then it was on the 5 o'clock fucking news on Miami about this giant snake in a Denny's parking lot. And they had all the cops there. And oh my God. It was the last time I ever did anything like that. So we're doing that at home, kiddies. It was fucked up. Like I said, I was a little fucking raging asshole. And,
perhaps I should have brought that one up. Huh?
No, it's fine. It's. I mean, in retrospect, but there was no giant snakes running all over Florida at the time. This was way.
No, there
before,
wasn't. And it seemed like after that hurricane, man, is when it all started with the berms down there, man.
It was a stupid practical joke. And when it was an alternative to putting a brick through his windshield. So
that's a good damn story, though, Ron.
Yeah, the statute of limitations is passed on that one, man. You're gonna be okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was so bad.
Meanwhile, this guy's like, "That's the biggest dang copperhead I ever seen."
Yeah, it was. Miami had a 5 o'clock news thing, and I was sitting there, and it was on there, and I was like, "Oh my fucking God!" And they were talking. There were all these police, and the guy was out there. I don't know. I just pulled in, and then I came back out, and this thing was there, and it was dead. I don't know. was like, oh fuck. Thank God they didn't have cameras at the time or any of that shit. Nowadays, you know, you'd be getting a knock on your door. And what's fucked up about that is in the same fucking place 3 years later, I was driving on I-95. Some fucking guy committed suicide by jumping off the overpass above I-95. And I was in a line of cars that hit this. I didn't know that I was running over. I knew it was like there was a big truck in front of me, and I saw an explosion of something. Apparently, it was body fluid, and I had the body chunks bouncing off my fucking car, like all of us did that were in the. It was fucking horrible. That I don't, you know, the more I think about that fucking place, the best thing we ever did was move.
I can remember
that really was
on
the
that damn futon. You lived off the expressway, man, and they were blowing off guns in the middle of the night, man. And I rolled onto the floor, and that was a bogus neighborhood, dude.
Yeah, Alan Rapace did that too. He slept on the futon, and he heard the gunshots, and he wakes. He's like, "Dude, what the fuck?" I'm like, "That's normal, man. Go back to sleep. This is You know, he went to the 7-Eleven. There were fucking hookers and gangbangers out there.
That's where you had the first blue tegus, man. And I remember you picked us up, went over there. We ordered some fast food, and you took me into the backyard, man. Do you remember, man? My jaw dropped when I saw them damn things.
Yeah.
Never forget that, man.
Yeah, you talk about it. I'm sure you've told the story a million times, but you were talking about, I think it was a T negative or T positive for the night anoles. The guy showed up. Was it like a McDonald's paper bag or a Burger King paper bag?
That was a McDonald's paper bag in Florida City, which is pretty rough.
Those guys were all meth heads, weren't they? Those collectors. Those were the same collectors John used at Emerald Coral, right, Ron?
A lot of them were, yeah. I mean, those guys, they live a hard life. They were, you know.
Oh yeah.
They were definitely not. They all had a rough life, but
you got to feel bad for people like that, man.
Yeah, that was a kid though that caught that, but yeah, he was part of that whole kind of scene. And anyway, I got a picture of it, and then I threw it up on the internet, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Where's that thing?" And then I'm like, I wasn't gonna buy it. When they told me he won $1,000 for this fucking yellow and all, I was like, get the fuck out of here. But I thought it was unusual enough. I threw it up on the internet, and then all of a sudden my fucking phone blew up. Like they're like, where is that? Do you have it? How much do you want for it? And then I'm like, oh fuck, I just alerted the world to the existence of this thing. So this is like 3 hours south of me. So I fucking went straight to the bank, took the cash out, got in my truck, hauled ass, did like a 3-hour drive in like an hour and a half. I was fucking flying. And then the kid gives me the fucking address, and it was a total fucking, it was a drug hole. And I was like, oh man, there's these dudes standing all over on the side, drinking and shit. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna get fucking robbed. I got $1,000 cash, and these motherfuckers don't know me. And it's a good thing I always drive piece of shit cars. That's all I'm gonna say.
Same.
Inconspicuous.
So,
Yeah.
So I pull in there, and I'm looking for this fucking kid, and then I see this kid with this fucking dirty ass McDonald's bag. I'm like, please tell me this is not. So I pull up next. I'm like, hey man, I'm looking for so and so. He's got an animal for me, and he's like, oh, that's me, bro. And he runs over and he fucking opens up my car and jumps in, and I was like, the fuck? Am I getting carjacked here? What the hell is? And then he hands me the fucking bag. I open it up, and it's this half dead, bright yellow baby albino night and all. So I gave him the fucking money, and then here I am, like, right, I'm in this fucking clearly a drug hole neighborhood. I'm handing this kid a wad of cash and getting a baggie, and I'm like, oh, there's fucking cop. The cops are gonna, they probably. How do I know there's not cops around the corner? Watching all this, and they're gonna think I just did a drug buy, and it was fucked up. But I got out of there. I drove out of that neighborhood, started going home, and I stopped into a Burger King, and I took it in with me in the bathroom, put it under the water. Like, it was almost dead.
Then you put it in a clean Burger King bag, huh?
And then I probably, yeah. And then I got it home, and then obviously I saved it, and it bred and produced, and that's how they got started. But yeah, I'm not doing shit like that anymore. I'm fucking Heather and I live in this middle class Orlando fucking normal kind of area and shit now, and I'm not chasing after anything else. We have so many fucking skink projects here. We don't need to even think about anything else. I think we've got enough to ride 20 years here, and by then it ain't gonna fucking matter. So
no, I'm excited about the skink stuff, man. We bring it up a lot, and we have some private conversations about how that kind of stuff's going. Like I said, I'm looking forward to when that really kicks off. Like I said, it's going to get rolling. We talk about it. One of the issues with the skink community is a lack of money. All the big investors kind of left it. There's some scared money in it right now. But with what you guys are working on long term, I think it's going to be very successful because there's been a buzz about those for over 20 years. There's no reason why they shouldn't be like flying off the shelves,
Yeah. No, I think it'll be I think it's a good long term. I think that's a problem though, right? They've been here for a long time. Nobody did anything with them. So people are like, well, maybe there's an issue, but they're going to find out this year that there is no fucking issue because she's fucking kicking ass. But she's super on top of it. Like, I'm not going to lie. I've been doing this a long time and I'm fairly good at what I do, but I ain't got nothing on her. Like my method is I get two, I throw them in a fucking thing outside. I add food, I add water, and when they produce, I collect babies, and that's it. I don't spend a lot of time on it. I don't obsess over it. I don't constantly, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, for me, it's fire and forget. And then hopefully, it works. But for her, she's on it, and she'll focus on it and make sure that, so it's impressive. I don't have that kind of stamina. I look at her, I'm like, man, I'd rather be playing World of Warcraft right now than standing over these fucking skinks. Mm-hmm. But she's totally, and she's probably going to produce a bunch of double heads this year. She's got a lot already that appear to be gravid. I think I honestly don't fucking know because she's got 200 some skinks and I have no idea all I know is she's always on top of them. But I don't know exactly what she's pairing up and what she's doing. That's me. My role is I've pretty much moved into a support role these days now for her. Like, I do the background shit. I figure out the systems, and I kind of like it better that way. Honestly, I'm kind of this has worked out good. This is what she really wanted to do, and so and I kind of like it being in the background. Like I cages fucking break and I'll go out and fix them. I do that kind of shit. But all of the actual what goes to what, the husbandry around them, that's 100% her. And she, like I said, I mean, my husbandry was never that good. It's never been that good. Everything down to, it drives me fucking crazy because she's so on, there's like always something to do because okay, the bugs have to be fed perfectly, and then there's all these things. But yeah, I think she's going to surprise a lot of people. Including me. Like I said, I don't fucking know what. She'll come in with a box full of stuff, and she's like, "Oh, I just did this," and I'm like, "I didn't even know we had this fucking thing." So.
Yeah, she works her ass off, man.
Yeah.
I've seen both of you in action over there,
Yeah, I'm a lazy fuck, and that's never going to change.
Yeah, pretty much. All right.
Self-employed lazy fuck your entire life, buddy.
Nothing wrong with that, dude.
Yeah.
I'm going to be back in 1 minute, guys.
You're good, man. And we'll wrap up the skink thing. I don't want to bore William. Just staring at his face.
Yeah, no. Yeah, dude, sorry, William.
You raised a big meaty hand in the air once.
I got some questions about the skink stuff. So what's the kerfuffle about? Like, is the morphs northerns or easterns? I don't follow the morph stuff of skink, so I have no idea where the morphs derive from as far as I know Axanthics found in Indonesian, Papua, the Papuan blue tongues.
Yeah.
Halmahera, is that where the Axanthics?
I feel like 1 in 10 Halmaharas is Axanthic, but
yeah, that's what it seems like, right?
Well, dude, if you follow any Indonesian, it doesn't matter if it's a lizard, a python, or colubrid. a lot of them are, you get axanthics and patternless. Those are some of the most common morphs you find throughout. I mean, from retics all the way to like scrub pythons, and then all the pythons, at least the pythons I follow, you find those morphs in all of those species. Timors, Dunn's pythons, Savu pythons, Maclots, all of them. You find all kinds of odd morphs like that. But anyways, what I was getting at is, what's the kerfuffle about? Is it what the morphs from northerns or something, or easterns, the Australian morphs? Where can I get some history on them? Because I don't know much about where the morphs derive from.
Well, we actually have morphs from all of those. We have some from Indonesia, some out of northern, some out of easterns. But the eastern stuff, the northern stuff, we haven't been able to bring in bloodlines in a long time. There's some issues. Right. So basically what we did was when it comes to the morphs, we're considering it fair game for all of them, right? We're not trying to make pure examples of, so we're trying to make a homogenized generic blue tongue skink that contains all the available morphs in it so that you can make all of these combos. And so that's what we're doing with that. And then, but she's split it off though. So we're running pure lines of all this different stuff as well. So if you want pure stuff, then we can give you pure stuff. But if you want quad het fucking, blue tongues, the only way to get there is to homogenize them into a single, just like carpet python.
Right.
Or even both.
Right. Well, even with the carpet pythons, I find it like, so I'm pretty ignorant to the ranges of like the northerns and easterns. So I'm assuming the northerns are what, like Darwin area, and then the easterns, are they just certain parts of eastern Australia, or do they consider easterns throughout, like from the Cape all the way down to wherever their range stops south? You guys know the ranges of the easterns?
I should know about bullshit through.
Come on, Dave.
Yeah. I'm in the same spot. I'm like, I'm looking at it in my head, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering because I noticed like when you look at like the evolutionary history of a bunch of, almost all the Australian reptiles, they all evolved around the same time. And and they had a reclassification of a lot of like the Australian carpet pythons. So the Darwins, the Cape Yorks, and the carpets found in Papua are all genetically, they're the same. There's no real genetic divergence. The only ones that are genetically divergent from those populations are the Darwins, but not enough to be considered speciation or subspecies level. They're just slightly different on a molecular level than the Cape Yorks and the Papuan carpets. So I'm sure the same thing happens in the blue tongues.
Yeah,
but sure. I don't know how much has been looked into the, as far as genetics wise, as far as the dividing a lot of that stuff up. So, because I don't know. I see a lot of people get upset with stuff like that, and I'm just like, especially when you're dealing with morphs, you're dealing with broken mutations. So if you can outcross it, you need to do it if you can.
Exactly. That is exactly and I think that's, besides McNamara with his hand fisting a fucking elephant over there. The fucking
I got you on this one. So the thing is the community was based with people that were concerned about purity. And that was a big thing in the United States. Now in Australia, when it comes to breeding blue tongue skinks, these are designer mutations. They're going to cross whatever's going to make a healthy animal. And, we learned very early on in albinos is albino males do not breed. And that's why when Ben Siegel back in the day got in some albinos that both were male, never produced anything for them, those animals then I think ended up going to Bill Brandt for a little while. After they went from Bill Brandt, they went to Ray Gerge, but he was unsuccessful. And again, those animals were in the country for about 20 years. So the Australians did figure out that, crossing some of these northern mutations and eastern mutations, the albino being an eastern, they actually made a stronger animal that made a stronger breeder. Now, the one argument I've always had in the hobby, because again, the purist thing was a real big argument for a while, is how do you justify producing a mutation that might not be viable in someone's collection and put in a price tag of $10,000 on it? So the argument for me for the last decade has been, if we're going to go mainstream with mutations, we need to do it right. We need to make healthy animals. And that means we have to accept hybrids. But in a collection, like how Heather's managing hers, her collection isn't just one big like hybrid collection. She's treating it as, here's my pure Northerns, here's my pure Easterns, here's my IJ, here's my Marukis. But I took this Maruki combo and I put it with this IJ one for double hets. I took this Northern and maybe put it into an IJ for double hets. You know, whatever it takes to make a designer animal. And there will be parts of the hobby that will not want to go that route, like you know with the Australian species. You know, if Nick Mutton heard this, he would probably come and beat the shit out of all of us. But, you know, he is a purist, and we'll still have those in that community. But again, if you want to play the morph game, even in boa constrictors, all the boa constrictor stuff in arguably are hybrids because the original hypos from Panamania got put into everything.
Yep.
Well, and then you got someone like Ben Russo who, you know, he does the hybrids, but then he does pure stuff. So he does a mixture of all of it. So, yeah. I think
And that's exactly what we're doing.
I did
don't
get
see
a
problem.
hypo Colombian red tail in a shipment years ago, and Jeff wound up with that animal.
Yes, and Jeff in the early to mid 2000s did have hypos on his website that were pure Colombians.
Yeah, yep.
But at
That came mixed in a shipment back in the day, man. I remember.
That's awesome. Yeah, but you know, we had the salmon hypo, the orange tail hypo, and at that point, a pure Colombian really didn't matter. And now the sad thing is,
he figured that out, I guess, you know.
Yeah, but if he still had some of that original stock today, I mean, Vin Russo sells pure Colombians, I think, for $350, $450, $550, because arguably it's really hard to find that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So a pure hypo in someone's collection today actually could be a very valuable animal because the mindset of the hobby is a little different in that community.
Well, it's always that, like, you want what you can't have. And whenever something like that disappears or gets restricted and hard to find, then all of a sudden everyone wants it. You know, I see that with, like, you know, Indians and Sri Lankans and all that. You know, people grew up, they were a common snake.
Yep.
Well, not common, but they're more common than they are now. And now they're ESA and they're stupid rare. And now everyone, you know, I call them like the old classic cars animals, where it's like people who grew up in like the 80s and 90s and stuff, grew up having those animals. Now they kind of want to relive those their childhood or their earlier days in the hobby, and they kind of want to get back into that stuff. You know, I've noticed that with a lot of, at least the obscure species of, you know, animals and stuff.
I've always called the ball python the Ford Mustang of the hobby because everybody.
Well, I know he's got an Indian python that he's had for like 25 years, never bred it. But it's just, he's in a state where there's like, you know, there's not a whole lot of reptiles in that state. So he's like, what the fuck am I going to do with this thing? He still had it. It's just chilling there. But it's like, it's a legit Indian python. But it's like I said, it's like 25 years old now.
Who is this?
Who is
this?
You wouldn't know him. He's just a guy who does like reptile parties. He's got like, you know, big collection.
Is this a guy in Missouri?
Pythons. No, he's in Virginia.
He wants an address. He wants a phone number, bro.
So many people have tried to talk him into doing something with it. At this point, he's just like, I just like having it. Like, it's funny that so many people are trying to get me to like violate ESA.
Yeah, there's a guy down in Florida that I want some pretty rare shit from that. You know, he just chooses not to breed, and it's just. He's just like, he just doesn't care. I go, dude, you probably have some of the only group of this snake left. You know, it'd be nice to get a clutch out of it, but
yeah, this guy's collection is actually pretty badass. His name is Sean. He does reptile parties, so like it's nothing he has as a secret or anything, so I can put his name out there.
Right.
But he's just had this shit for so long because like he's got. Actually, it just died recently. He had a Burmese python. It was a male, and it was like 21 feet long. Like, it's the biggest worm I've ever seen in person when it was a fucking male. Like, I put it on my shoulder to take a picture, and its body was over my head. And he's like, "Yeah, I got it in like 1991." You know?
Yeah,
but
yeah, William. That's the old. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I had one other question with the blue tongue stuff. Is do you think it'll be an issue with exporting to other countries because of the whole Australian issue as far as Australian animals leaving and coming into the States? Do you think you'll have issues with that, or are you just going to...
Currently illegal, yeah. So
yeah, currently.
Okay. Well, I didn't know what them mean crosses or anything. If you just,
So that's what we don't know.
Labeled like something else.
That's a gray area that we're not sure.
So far, what I've heard from various sources, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. If it's a hybrid, it just counts as whatever it is. So
what did that mean? Like, you have an Indonesian hybrid to like a northern. Can you export that? Because I have heard that argument in the hobby that when you mix that in, that might be the loophole, and that might be good for the morph. Because Ron, you guys know, not being able to export these animals is actually the worst thing about these mutations right now, because people want them, but we can't get them to them.
Well, this is here's an example though. This is a state issue. Eric Westmoreland breeds a lot of colubrids. He's in Iowa. He's the one that got busted at Tinley for having a fucking rat.
I know.
Yep.
And they're like, no, they're actually from a prairie rat, or what was that?
Emery's rat.
Yeah. So if that counts, I mean, that's a state issue. That's not federal, but that's what they ruled in Illinois, at least. So.
Yeah, exactly. Because I had a hybrid common snapper, alligator snapper, and I had to pull a permit to possess it in Illinois because it had alligator snapper in it. The alligator snapper is endangered in the state of Illinois, and that's what happened. That's how Eric got jammed up with that. Somehow somebody went back and determined that the scaleless had started with an Emery's rat snake, so the genetics were there off of that. And
well, another funny part, was it Warren Booth who did the genetic testing on it for him?
I think Warren actually got involved in that.
He did some testing and had paperwork that proved that it was lower percentage Emery rat snake than your household dog is wolf.
Right, sure. That's why it didn't matter, I mean, it's crazy.
So he was dogs are illegal in Illinois then, based on this ruling,
Well, I think that could start becoming a problem, when people start breeding. That's the one, especially with the pythons and stuff in particular. When you start breeding like Burmese into like ball pythons and stuff like that, like, would those be illegal in Florida or, stuff like that, because they're half Burmese python. And even if they were a quarter Burmese python, be like, well, it's just better not to have them in general. So that's what I think it kind of gets a little murky when we start doing stuff like that. I don't know. I really don't even. Ron would probably know more about that than anyone, as far as like if people have those hybrids or something down there, if it's still get them in serious trouble or not.
Yeah, I mean, so it's kind of an untested case, right? So we have a ton of people that have tried to get us to export those skinks, especially the ones that are crosses with Indonesia. They're like, oh, we can just, and they're willing to pay really good money for it. And we have turned down every single one because not worth the fucking risk, man.
Not worth the chance, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So I just, if somebody else wants to risk it, have at it. And then maybe they'll set the precedent, but neither her nor I are willing to risk decades.
Well, somebody's got to be a guinea pig to start that case, because they're not going to overturn anything until it's challenged. So who wants to lead that charge?
Right.
Because I think earlier or sometime last year, Casey Cannon brought in some of those brittle hybrids from Canada, from Don Patterson.
Oh, yeah.
He brought those in, and I'm like, huh. I was like, I didn't think those, and they were like mostly Australian bloodline. I don't think there was much in the way of poplin carpet in them. So that's why I thought it was.
Well, not going to spill the beans, but there is one spot that they do come in the proper way with paperwork. Just that person at that stop is not really enforcing it.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I hear. I hear a lot of it has to do with sometimes the individual when it comes to fish and wildlife. Yeah. Some don't care, some do care. Just kind of
when that blue tongue thing just first went through, I actually was like, Ian, call our local agent. Called her, and she was like, if it's CITES 3, if you can prove that it's captive bred in the United States, it should be legal. But then she was like, but I can't guarantee that that's how it's going to go. So,
yeah. Well, the argument that they have, right, is that there were no legal Australian blue tongue skinks, but I mean, I've seen ads from like a 1950s Woolworth ads where Woolworth was selling fucking Australian blue tongues. So we're talking about a department store. I didn't even know Woolworth sold that kind of shit.
Way before. Yeah.
So all the way back to the 50s, they were in the US in numbers. I mean, I can remember, like I said, in the 80s when I got involved in this, there were already people breeding blue tongues and, all this Australian shit was here. So I mean, I don't know how they would. I mean, I would think that alone would allow you to torpedo their assertion in court, because you have precedent that they were sold in retail establishments, legally in the 1950s. So were they here in the 60s, 70s, and they live a long fucking time. There are plenty of people with 20-plus-year-old blue tongues. They're not.
Cheryl's got a 25-year-old one or something.
Yeah. So I think it could be. The thing is, somebody's got to have the fucking the finances to hire attorneys and all that shit, and that ain't gonna be us.
No. Well, I mean, that's the big question though. Like, what would that cost? Like, if there's a reality that, long-term for your business, if that investment is putting into a lawyer to maybe overturn something that is not unfair, but just like, unsubstantiated, they can't prove it. And like you said, these
it's actually 50s. No, there's actually a lawsuit against them right now for that by somebody else.
Really?
I had heard somebody was working on it. Yeah.
Are we allowed to talk about that? Or that's probably wait until it's done, right?
We'll wait. Probably, yeah.
Right.
But there is some movement in that direction by somebody that can afford to do it.
Has there ever been a precedent in the hobby for a species where things have been overturned?
Well, big berms and retigs.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Kind of, I guess, but I mean, it still counts, right?
Right.
Well, but you can't import that stuff anymore.
Exactly. That's why I was like, well, kind of. At least they can
Well,
prosecute.
they can't legally do it. They still get them. If they want them, they get them.
Honestly, if those fucking things had not wound up down here in South Florida, I don't think we would even be having that conversation at all. That really was a black eye for the industry. And
oh yeah.
I remember they used to come out of Vietnam at $8 a piece and 100 lot, man. You know? I mean, they came in big time back in the day.
Well, that's that big 19 or 20 male or whatever it was. That thing was a fucking original import from wherever. So that I'm assuming that's why it was so big, because all of ours are inbred at this point. But
well, no, talk about that. There's smaller, more dwarf berms, and you said the older blood was actually the bigger stuff, right?
Yeah. Dwarf berms.
Good response, buddy. Good response. Good fucking response. You're out of the conversation. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
No. Well, how about this? Ron, you've been yawning a little bit. It's 9:00, so it's way past your bedtime. As being a full-time maintenance man, I can tell you got to get up early and do some shit.
Dude, I don't go to bed till fucking midnight, man. What are you talking about?
Okay, well, we'll keep talking. Keep talking, man.
I'm good.
Right.
Keep going.
More time to this.
Poor William hasn't gotten a word in edgewise. John's over there falling asleep. Wake the fuck up.
All ears.
I mean, that fucking trucker shit going on. He looks like he just came off of like a 36-hour truck run to deliver shit.
Well, the Chicago route was 17 hours this week. And I still ain't recouped from that, dude.
I've been doing Florida runs on Dave's fucking racks.
Yeah. Everybody needs racks. Oh my.
Fucking rats.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, how about this? I always tell people in the hobby that the only way you fail is if you stop grinding. Yep. And there's a lot of people that like to talk about how this is the end of the hobby. Oh, this is that. Ron, you're a guy for 40 years now, am I right? Has found a way to make a living in this hobby, lots of different species. And the one thing that I always mention with people, William building his collection the way he is, you're allowed to have your passion projects, but then you need the ones to keep the lights on. And you mentioned that with your bearded dragons, your tegus. Like, you have always found that balance, but in the process have bred not hundreds, but well over 100 different species. Like, how do you do you have any advice for people? I mean, I know everyone makes it their own way, but it just seems like laziness, in my opinion, is why people fail in this hobby.
I don't think it's laziness. I mean, you can look at not just the hobby, you can look at everything like this, right? I mean, somebody does something and is successful and gets a lot of, attention over it. And then everybody rushes to copy what that person's doing. the problem with that is, while it does work to some degree, and a few of them will be, successful doing that, that's really not, as far as I'm concerned, that's not the way. Like, you're better off. There's lots of fucking avenues that you can go. You don't have to go. I mean, that's what I do. I do, like you said, I maintain what I could call the battery. The battery is a group of animals that reliably produces, that have, big commercial, you can produce commercial numbers, and you can sell them easily, and they keep the lights on. The bearded dragon, I always had 30 adult bearded dragons that were the battery for everything I did. And when Heather and I got together, she was already doing that and doing it better than I was doing it. So we have the bearded dragon battery, and then we also have, no, I guess the bearded dragons are still a fucking battery. And then I use white street frogs to some degree. If shit's, if we have a bad year, or we need a little extra money to keep everything going, I can just go get a couple of fucking frogs, throw them in a rain chamber, and boom, I got a couple thousand. You can make 50 grand or whatever, and that'll put you over. So I do stuff like that to keep the lights on. But I always have all these fucking things going on. Like the skinks initially were one of those things. That was something Heather wanted to do. So I'm like, well, I can get all this stuff. Like, I know everybody. I'm sure I can, and I did. I started making phone calls, and I got loans. I got people to put on loan all the morphs. So it took about a year. Ryan Johnson particularly was the big, he's like, dude, I got all these things, I got the albinos, I got the hypermels, patternless, all the shit. So he offered to send them to us on loan. And we took them, and now she's got, 200 fucking blue tongues here, that a lot of them now are ours. They're hets and stuff that she produced. And she produced the first albinos maybe ever in the United States. I don't know if anybody else has done it. If they have, I haven't heard of him at all.
No, she was the first, as far as I'm aware. I've never heard of anything like mutation wise, other than that Xanthic I sent down to you guys that was produced by a gentleman named Jim in St. Louis.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something that was captive bred that spontaneously popped up in a pairing, but like that just doesn't happen. And back when I used to talk to Barcheck a lot, he had mentioned that somebody near the West Coast had an albino pop up in their northern colony, but that never substantiated anything. And that was like a decade ago we had that conversation.
Yeah. So she's got those into production already, and she's had the patternless into, well, we call them toffees now because there's two different patternless morphs. And so she's had those in production now for 2 years. This year we'll probably start releasing them more readily, but and a lot more on the horizon. So those will eventually become another battery, and then at that point, maybe we can stop producing as many bearded dragons. She can lower the bearded dragon thing down to just very high, because we're in the middle of the albino bearded dragon project too that we're working out, which is a total fucking mess, and she's trying to fix it. And so but that will add a new regularly available mutation to the bearded dragon, which should push them, make them popular again, more so than normal.
Can we talk about the albino just for a second? Because you're talking about issues. Now, does that do with like lighting and just their sensitive eyes or anything like that? Or what are the issues? Are they just weaker animals?
They are, but I really can't.
We can save it.
How can I? No, I don't want to hold anything back, but my honest opinion, it's just an opinion. It seems like there were corners cut that shouldn't have been cut to get these things out. That there should have, like, we're much slower. There's a reason why it takes us a long time to get these morphs out, because if you just go straight to producing them the quickest way possible on something like a bearded dragon that has, they're fairly inbred now at this point, even though we injected Barbata blood into them a few years ago, it buys you some more generations, but it's not a long-term fix for lack of genetic, variability. But it looks like the founder cut corners pretty hard to get them out quick. So we weren't even going to buy them. somebody else that we know bought them, brought them in, and then when they got them, they, we ended up in a discussion, and they were like, "You guys want to take these on loan, see what you can do?" So we did. They're a fucking mess, but she's going to outcross them, and we should get the hets for the first time this year. And as long as they're, a good outcrossing, will probably go a long way. So, because these will go into the outcross that she's going to use has relatively fresh barbata blood in him. So it should be totally different than these things, because they were produced in like Thailand or someplace. I don't remember where the original ones were, but they got them out quick. They got them to market fast, and they made quad visual mutations of these things already. They've got that's not at all how you do this. You need to make some hets, and get strong single gene versions of those. And then you can start, outcrossing them into and adding more mutations, but you don't want to and one of the mutations used is one of the worst mutations in bearded dragons. It has problems. It's called translucent, and it's a problematic mutation on its own. So why you would plug that in to a brand new dragon mutation, already make triple combos like that so quickly, it's a long term. It should have been a long term, step by step. I get why people get excited. They want to get them out. They think they're in competition with everybody. But reptile breeding is the long game. That's probably the best advice I could give you. It is the fucking long game. The long game is make the best possible fucking version of what you're after. Know what you want, and don't cut fucking corners no matter what. Because every time I've ever cut corners, it's smacked me in the face.
So I shouldn't breed my brand new ball python morph to a scaleless spider.
I thought you were going to say silky albinos at first. I didn't think you were talking about translucent.
I mean, though, but in ball pythons, you guys have so much genetic diversity.
It doesn't count, man. Those things are bulletproof. You can do whatever you want with those.
You probably could. But dragons are now like fucking domesticated. They're like 50 goddamn generations deep. No new bloodlines really, except the occasional, like I said, that's why we took the Easterns and plugged them in there, because you can't get reliably, genetic material from Viticeps that you don't know, because we ship them all over the fucking world. It's funny as hell, honestly. I gotta kind of laugh. A few years, like 15 years ago, I was producing these shit hot red dragons. Okay. And I'm sending them all. They're all going to fucking China. Okay. They're buying them all up. And then I see my own dragons being sold from China, being exported back here for like 10 times what I sold them for. And U.S. breeders going, Chinese imports, new blood, amazing. I'm thinking, bitch, those were for me. I sent them there. They're sending them back. Like, and what's funny about it is that you can actually, if you've been doing it long enough and your lines are, you kind of, I mean, at least in my case, I didn't really think about it. I just pick for what I like. You eventually can see in those things, oh, that's from, this is St.Pierre's, because they have this specific look to them. The dunner that I use is, and the coloring and all that. And that's because that was what I was choosing at the time. So they actually become a little distinct. And when you've seen a lot of them, you can spot, if I see a phantom dragon, I know I can spot them. You can just look at them and know, oh yeah, that's fucking Josh's, because he picks, he likes this certain thing, these certain striping and certain colors. And you can spot one of his dragons. Like it's not 100%, but a lot of times, I see a dragon, go, oh, that's a phantom dragon. You ask a person, they're like, yeah, I got it from Phantom. So they become distinct. So when I see my shit coming back from the source that I sold them to, then I know, and I kind of laugh. And then they're dragons I sold for like $30 wholesale are coming back for $1,000, and people are fucking, oh, these are Chinese imports unrelated to U.S. shit. I'm like, fuck, it ain't. it ain't my place to say. So, and that happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, how did bearded dragons slip through the cracks that were still importing, exporting, that kind of stuff?
Oh, Well, because they're worldwide in enormous numbers, they don't.
This doesn't matter.
They're a whole different thing, man. I mean, how many blue tongues are realistically produced in the United States? Maybe 10,000.
Yeah, 10,000 maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But I can cite two different single sources that each do around 800,000 bearded dragons a year. And that's two sources, and there's more than that. So you're talking about millions of bearded dragons just in the United States. There are massive farms in South America that produce massive.
John and Nina's when we got an El Salvador shipment in once. I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah.
No, I got to talk to Howard Fluker years ago.
Yep.
He was talking about El Salvador. That might have been a shipment from his
Probably
place.
Fluker's one.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's some in Peru. There's massive farms in Asia now.
I think
They're
the Peru farm is owned by Fluker, if I'm correct, man.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So, and even though, and so that's a good case in point, though. Even though they come in enormous numbers, relatively cheaply, you can buy them in any store. She sells every fucking dragon that she produces for several $100s because they're perfect. They're raised to a specific size, So you can make a living at even things that are incredibly common and produced in massive numbers, as long as you do it better than everybody else. And that's not hard. That's really not hard to do. You just have to fucking, like I said, it's playing the long game.
Yeah, well, it's funny, even with like the blue tongues, like every year Cheryl produces about as many blue tongues as we sell. We sell every single one retail, and just about by the time we run out, our next babies are born. Like right now, we've got a few babies left from last year. Females are all bred and gravid, and we're just a waiting game at this point. But I freak out when somebody goes on Morph Market and posts like 12 of them for $75 a piece. And I'm like, Cheryl, those will be all sold in like 24 hours.
Yeah.
What's left is yours at $250, and the other one's at $250 or whatever you sell them for. And I'm like, just chill. And every year we don't have to wholesale, and we just sell what we sell, and it makes most of our money for bills and stuff. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have gone to we've actually recently had shows where we had people vending next to us that are selling bearded dragons to the public for $20 and $30, but they're little scrawny fucking pieces of shit, essentially. I mean, I hate to say that, but that's, I mean, when I look at that, I'm like, why the fuck would you even bring that? And they're right next to us, and yet she sells every fucking one for top dollar right away, and like I said, the average price I think is around $200. Yeah, some are as much as $450, some are, but I mean, when we sell out at every show, we do not come home with bearded dragons, and just like you said, it's all retail. So we usually take about 50 to a show or somewhere in that, depending on what we have. And she fucking, I mean, I honestly though, I didn't think that was. I always thought, no, there's no fucking way. There's too much competition. There's, when you got some guy over there selling them for $20 or $50, there's no fucking way. And she's like, oh, I will, and she does every fucking one, man. So it's. I've learned a lot about how you really, like. I never rolled this way, right? I would produce stuff. I would wholesale the vast majority of it. If you knew me personally, you'd get dibs on shit that I had. And basically, by the time October rolled around, I didn't want anything else left. I would fucking call Strictly or any of those guys. I'd be like, I got 50 of this, 100 of this, 25 of this, and give them really low wholesale prices. And then I would sell everything, and then I'd be done from October until the next season. And I'd tap out of the reptile industry and go play fucking video games all winter until it started to warm up. And then it would bring me out of hibernation too, and I'd go back to it. That's how I operated pretty much the entire time. I liked my couple months off, and I used to stock up cash in the bank for the, in October, so I had enough to live on until the next season. And that's how I work. Just kind of like commercial fishermen do. They make all their money in one time, and then they live off it until the next time. And I set my shit up like that because that's the lifestyle that I prefer. Because I was burnt out, and it helps burn out.
So, one thing I really like about you, because you fall into the category as somebody who just pays attention. I always talk about Junior at JMG Reptiles really pays attention. Heather really pays attention. But when you guys told me about keeping baby bearded dragons in semi-arboreal cages to keep them from nipping each other's feet and tails, and I thought that was beautiful. Genius,
You know where that came, that idea came to me on the fucking shitter, man.
Yeah.
That was a fabulous idea, though. Man.
Yeah.
I followed your recommendations, Ron, and man, they thrived. All the ones I would get.
Yeah. My ex-wife used to buy these fucking stupid travel magazines, and they were always fucking in the bathroom. And didn't have my phone, so I pulled one of them out. And I'm flipping through it. I come across this picture of a cattle ranch in Australia, and there were little bearded dragons along the fence line on top of the weeds. And I was like, motherfucker, they're not on the sand. Because at the time I had in my head that, they were kind of in a desert thing, they're out like kind of like fucking Utas and shit, running around out in the middle of nowhere. And I saw this and I was like, fuck, this looks like a fence line on my property. And these things this is how you find green iguanas. Like I used to catch fuck tons of baby iguanas. And that was how I did it.
Lizards, when you were saying that, like the fence lizards are all over the place here. They look like a little
Yeah. And so I thought to myself when I saw that, I'm like, I wonder if they're fucking. I could see in my head that when you put them in a bare floor, that they all kind of stack up on top of each other. And I'm like, fuck, they're trying to get up. And so when they're doing that, you're depriving them of their innate need for security to get up on stuff. And that's why they fucking start nipping each other. That's a nervous tick response to anxiety, essentially. And you're forcing this on them. So I changed over to that method, and that was a total fucking game changer.
I would take an egg crate, Ron, and I would stack it in the cages. You'd see dragons sitting on the top. Some would be in the middle. Some would be on the ground, on a paper towel. They could thermoregulate throughout the course of the day. They could be at a higher temperature, closer to the basking light. Still hide if they wanted to. And it makes perfect sense, man.
Yeah, I mean, we use even semi-arboreal enclosures entirely for them now, even the adults. Everything has a couple feet of and branches and shelving, and they're always up. They're never on the ground. Like, it's pretty rare to see one on the ground. So, and if you think about that animal, even when you see them, videos of them in Australia, they're up on shit. They're in low bushes and shit like that. So, yeah, it's a misunderstood animal to some degree.
Yeah. Always ways to improve on what we're doing just because they're reproducing, like you said.
Correct.
I remember nip bearded dragons for 20 years in the hobby.
Yep.
And now, with your method, shouldn't be an issue anymore unless you're not feeding.
Yeah, and you can tell who operates that way and who doesn't because they have a lot of nips. And if they have a lot of nips, that they're using a basking rock and a bare floor. And it fucking doesn't work. It's counter to what that animal needs. That animal needs to climb. It needs to be able to separate itself too from each other. So, I use this thing I call a tumbleweed, and essentially what it is we have a ton of oak trees, and they have all these little, oak trees have shit tons of little sticks on their branches. So I cut a couple of them and I mash them together into a ball, and we put it in the center, and it gives. You can put 50 fucking bearded dragons in there, and each one of them can have its own little stick to sit on, and they use it. And so it's a pretty big deal. I mean, it's a fucking game changer for sure when it comes to that. It was one of those stupid things, just a magazine that happened to be there. And if I had never thumbed through it, I probably would not have made that connection. But it was just like, oh, sometimes a lot of these ideas, man, people get, I think we're not even really, I think they just kind of pop. And you don't even really know a lot of them don't make sense. So some of the ones I've had don't make any sense. And yet there it is. And if you hear like musicians will say that, that they don't know where it comes from. They just have this they hear a riff in their head, and it doesn't, I don't know. I think a lot of that is just kind of having those moments where your mind is not, because we're mired in shit, right? I mean, you're constantly bombarded by all kinds of shit, especially now, fucking phones and all this media that's bombarding the shit out of you. So it's hard to really get to those points where you can just fucking think about stuff and not be assaulted by just life in general. So,
well, I'm glad you spent more than a minute taking a shit. I usually wait till the moment I'm almost pooping my pants, and I usually sit down and get over it. I'll be honest, I'm in like when people know I'm shitting, I'll get out so fast. You thought I went in there to take a pee. Yes, I do wipe. I think well enough. I don't know for sure.
Gotta get a bidet, brother.
Oh no, I hated that thing, man. I didn't like that feeling. I need a reverse bidet for my toilet right now, though. Like where my poo makes contact with the porcelain when I flush, it's like
Looks like an indigo snake.
it's holding on, man. It's holding on.
Oh, God, Dave.
Man,
Yeah.
Picasso, man.
No, it's a bad lay. I got to do something different. I got to pour some. Yeah, I'm not gonna talk about it anymore. Well, how about this, guys? So first off, John, I appreciate you coming out and doing this.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
I love bringing people out that don't do this on the regular. I get a little sick and listen to everyone saying the same shit over again, the same guests coming on. You know you are. Don't get me wrong, Ron, you're a regular.
Yeah, I'm like,
you know the
wonder who he's fucking talking about.
Yeah, no, not well. I will say, and I'm going to work my way around with everybody, but John, no, I'm sorry, John, I've already given you a compliment. Ron, 4 years ago, we had never really spoken. When I called you to do a podcast with me, when I was with Ryan and Benjamin,
Yep.
you had said you were already watching my stuff, which I respected that because I didn't tell anybody I was doing anything. I love that first podcast. I think it was like 3.5 hours. I'm going to repost that episode tomorrow. I always enjoy the conversation because, where we might repeat ourselves a little bit, Ron, I feel like we can go 1,000 different directions. William, I feel like I ruined this for you. I was like, William, how happy would you be if I brought Ron St.Pierre on for us? And he's like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And
I enjoy listening to them talk. It's always fun listening to especially two people
Got
that
a lot
have
of
history
stories
together.
to tell, Ron.
Yeah. These
Yeah.
guys you have around a campfire and you drink till someone passes out or something.
No, but I could have. I wanted this to be more about you because, like I said, I've had about 3 really good podcasts I want to say with Ron in the past. But when a couple days go by with an idea, like I just think about who I can get together to have a new, unique conversation. And again, John, even the conversation we had before today, I always enjoy our talks. Even before I even knew you and you cornered me, I think you were doing a little drinking at Tinley. Told me about the banana ball python carnival story back in the day. I've repeated that story for years after you told me that because I love those stories. And Mike, I appreciate you setting up the computer. That's about as far as I can go with that.
No, you see this setup we've got going on right now. It's professional as fuck.
It's beautiful. But again, John, you being a big import guy, the time that Mike put in with Outback Ian, I just thought that this would be a good chemistry. But the toughest thing when you get that many people in one little area, it's tough to spread the wealth in conversation. You kind of have to, certain people are going to shine a little more. William failed miserably today, and I
tried my best.
I kind of laid back too, man, but I enjoy being
owe
man.
And no, John, you did just fine. I'll be honest. Now that we popped your cherry, me and you are going to do like a one-on-one now.
Yep.
There's a lot of different things we could have discussed too about the trade back in the day. It wasn't pertaining to morphs. It's things that used to come in that are non-existent now, but that's probably a story for another day.
Lost in time, buddy. But I'll tell you one thing. I mentioned you guys in the middle of a big move. We were in the middle of it when I showed up for this. That's why I showed up 5 minutes before we started today. But as of March 1st, time is different, and I want to do more of this. So I want little small chats. And John, you're going to be one of these guys I bring out for a little lunch session. We sit down and talk. I want to have a lot more conversations. There's a lot of people in the hobby that should be heard. People don't even know about you. You are a diamond in the rough, my friend.
Pretty rough, man.
It's more like an unpolished turd, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to take us away from cheating like stories, but I appreciate that. But
speaking of,
I know.
Boy Dennis,
I've been looking at McNamara back there fisting an elephant.
The sad thing is because of the frame, I don't even know if people know what's going on there. I mean, that could be a reverse Ace Ventura costume and shit.
right there.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be doing the Hitler sign for all I know, man. I can't see him back there. I'm sorry. My bad. But so nonetheless, guys, I enjoyed this honestly, and I think we're gonna do something soon. John, will I see you at Tinley in a couple weeks?
You will.
We'll be there.
Well, Ron, you guys coming up for this one?
Yeah, we'll be with him. We're, We have 2 tables, I think, this year. I don't know. We'll be there for sure, though.
William's going to be there again. No, William's a cameo guy. You going to make a cameo?
No, it depends. If people buy snakes and want me to deliver them up to 10 lane, I
You
might.
better
But other than that, I don't even live that far away. I'm probably the closest to 10 lane. I'm just like, I don't know. We'll
I'll
see.
pick you up on the way if you want to go, but once you get there, you're on your own, man.
Yeah, don't be the odd man out. Everybody else here's going.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm on the
right.
couch circle on there, man. I have no couch to give you. So
right.
that's
Right.
the
We're gonna both bum it on the road, right, or out in the street,
I
in
mean,
the lobby.
I don't know
Just
what to tell
until
you
they
either,
kick us
so.
out.
Mike knows a campground right around the corner.
Dude,
Right.
it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
But
A little chilly.
a little chill. Well,
Yeah, make sure you guys come and see us, man. We'll definitely be
Oh, yeah.
there. So.
we always
Yeah,
do.
come on by, man.
But again, guys, I appreciate it. Anytime you guys make time for me, I really do appreciate it. So till the next one, and there will be a next one. I'll catch you guys later.
Guys, all have a good night.
Have a good night.
Hey guys,
See you guys.
like and subscribe. Make me want to keep on doing this. Later, guys.